Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I apologize for the late start. I have run into a bit of an emergency here um, that I'm going to have to suss out. But since the show was booked, I went on and decided to have the show, and I will try to work out my emergency after the fact. I see my guest here, so I want to bring him on. I don't want him waiting. We are joined with the man himself, Laith Marouf. How you doing, Laith? You doing okay today?
Doing great. Thank you very much. I hope your emergency
Laith,
is not serious. That if it's serious, we shouldn't be doing this. I care for your life more than anything.
well, I appreciate that, Laith. I care for my life too, but I can't fix it in this very moment. It's going to take a bit. I will work it out though. I'll work it out. Don't have a choice. But Laith Marouf, award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization. He is, you can find him on Free Palestine TV. You can also find him on Free Palestine, that video. Laith does amazing work, so definitely check out his content. He is Johnny on the spot in the Middle East, especially for the reporting that is taking place there. And I guess that brings us to what has been taking place in regards to attacks by Israel. Hezbollah puts out an open letter. Israel and the U.S. in coordinated strikes attacks southern Lebanon. The government of Lebanon puts out a strongly worded statement calling it, basically, I think the term they use is a full-fledged crime is the term the government used for it. What's going on with this? I mean, this seems like a tinderbox.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're very close to a return to full war. Right now, it's been 9 months of the quote-unquote ceasefire, where the Zionists have been targeting civilian infrastructure and civilians in South Lebanon, but across also Lebanon in general. And the resistance has been holding back in terms of retaliating to these violations. I think the Hezbollah has allowed this to play out, to see the parameters of the battle inside Lebanon, the capabilities of the Americans and the Zionists to influence sectors of society or the government, to see how far they can go. And over the last few weeks, a month, it now has become very clear that the Zionists and the United States have no control over the government, over the military, and over society or militias inside Lebanon that could be used against the resistance forces like Hezbollah. So we saw over the last week the president order the Lebanese military, President Joseph Aoun, he ordered the military to begin preparations to defend Lebanon. And this, of course, came after the Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, who's a total 100% puppet of the United States, attempted to force the military to confront Hezbollah and disarm it, and the military refused. The chief of staff of the military and the generals in the military said they will not be doing so. We saw, of course, the imperial envoy Thomas Barak admit finally that what they wanted to do is to have the military kill its own people, meaning killing Lebanese civilians. And all of this, as well as the statements about that there will never be peace in the whole Arabic world with the Zionist colony, that the Zionist colony will be dominating, and that the Arabic peoples have to be submitting to this, and that they will continue killing Arabs and Muslims till the end of time, because, of course, any dignified people would refuse to be dominated by another, and therefore this killing machine of the Zionist colony will continue if it needs to exist as a Jewish supremacy colony. So all of these indicators now have shown there will be a return to full-fledged war if the United States and their Jewish colony want to disarm the resistance in Lebanon. They have to do it themselves. And the attacks over the last 24 hours, these mass attacks that happened in the south of Lebanon were beginnings of that. We also heard from the Zionist and the American military that they were involved in these attacks, that American generals are sitting in the Northern Command at the Crusader colony, dictating these attacks and okaying them. So we're really driving towards a full war. It could happen within the next few days or week that Hezbollah retaliates. One last thing I would say here is that there was, of the multiple targets that the Crusaders attacked, before they attacked, they had put out maps of targets that they want to attack. There was at least 2 bases of the Lebanese military, and the Lebanese military refused to evacuate, and that led to the Crusaders not attacking those bases, basically. So now we see that there is a determination from the Lebanese military to give sacrifices to defend Lebanon, to not follow the dictates of the Zionists or be scared of the threats, and that the Crusaders are scared of actually directly confronting the Lebanese military, because that will galvanize all society in Lebanon behind the resistance and the military.
So one of the things that Hezbollah pointed out in their open letter was that there needs to be a coordination between the resistance and the military. Basically, that there needs to be a united front. And that what is the point of negotiations when the Zionist colony didn't fulfill the previous negotiations? Effectively, you've been murdering people over the course of this quote-unquote ceasefire. Why will we enter into another negotiation with you? In which case, Hezbollah was like, A, we shouldn't do that, and B, we need to work as a united front. Is the military holding their ground? Is that an indication that the military may actually, let's say, work with Hezbollah in resisting this war? I mean, the statement from the president was pretty strong, but does that mean that the president is actually going to order the military to actually defend the integrity of Lebanon with Hezbollah?
Yes, I think it does indicate that. There's a few things there. One thing is that, President Joseph Aoun was the chief of staff of the military before. So there is a lot of power he has still, even though he is the president, and a lot of love within the military, caters to him. Because of the time he served, he attempted to raise their salaries and their living standards of the soldiers there. The other thing is that we see that the Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, the puppet Prime Minister, wanted to have direct negotiations with the Zionists. And if you know history, it's been decades that the Lebanese government refuses to have direct negotiations with the Crusaders. They would negotiate with the patrons of the Crusader colony, with the Americans, and in separate rooms, and not sit with them, because they do not want to acknowledge the existence of this fallacy. Okay, and so for the Hezbollah to make this statement is really directed at this puppet prime minister, to tell him, no, this is not going to happen. Number one, there will be no direct negotiations with this Crusader colony, and the military and the president will not allow it to happen. This is a no-go. Okay, so what Nawaf Salam and the Americans were trying to do was basically get a de facto acknowledgement of the colony's right to exist with these direct negotiations. So that's number one. Number two is that yes, there's been multiple agreements signed over 70 years of war with this colony, and none of them have ever come to fruition. The Crusaders and the imperialists behind them always violate these treaties and these agreements. Therefore, there's no need to negotiate something new if what is already on paper hasn't been implemented or respected by the Jew-haters or their patrons in the West. So I think this is where we're going. There's not going to be any direct negotiations, and there will be no negotiating something that hasn't been implemented or already renegotiating it.
So this is going to open war. That is the way that you're looking at it. That is the way that this is coming across at this point. Israel is going to continue their attacks. Hezbollah is going to respond to those attacks.
Yes, and we know that at this moment, it seems like also Yemen will be involved. If Lebanon is attacked directly by, and there's a full-scale war, and Hezbollah is responding, and the Lebanese military is responding, there will be an engagement by Yemen, and there will be an engagement by Iran. This time, it's not going to be one front at a time, and this is going to change the whole dynamic of this war. The American presence in the area also may come under attack. I expect Syria itself that there will be some actions happening there, where many underground militias have been formed over the last 9 months inside Syria, and they may be active in this battle.
The Iran one is interesting. Up to this point, Iran hasn't responded short of being attacked, meaning Iran usually responds once they're attacked. They did say that they were given solidarity with the axis of resistance in this case. But you really believe that Iran would get involved in some kind of military campaign if indeed this breaks out into full-fledged war against Lebanon?
I believe so, definitely, because right now the American military and the Zionist colony, the Jew-hater colony, that I'm going to stop using the word Zionist. I'm going to purposefully use the word Jew-hater because I think the global consciousness has reached a level of understanding that we don't need to write PhDs to discuss these things, and we need to be very directed in our propaganda words. We need to shame and reveal the truth, and Jew-hater is a perfect term right now. But to come back to Iran.
And wait, just so I understand, what's the term? Jews-hater?
Jew-hater instead of crusader.
Oh, Jew-hater.
Right. Yes, okay. It's the Jew-hater. Okay. Right? Yes. There's, like this idea. Every time we say Zionist, we have to explain to everybody that's the political ideology and it's different than Judaism and so forth. But it's been 140 years since the founding of the Zionist movement, and not one Jew on this planet carried arms to liberate Judaism from Zionism, or to defend the victims, the tens of millions of victims in Palestine, in the Arabic world, and the Muslim world of this project. I mean, this is a shame on Jewish people the whole world over. There was 70,000 Germans that carried arms against Zionism, Nazism, and died, were martyred to defend the honor of German people. There was thousands of Germans that risked their life to hide Jewish people during the Holocaust. There's not been one Jew on this whole planet that tried to save a Palestinian, let alone carry arms against Zionism, right? So it's done for me. Until I see a Jew get martyred to save Judaism from Zionism, or to save a Palestinian or an Arab or a Muslim from the crimes committed in their name, there is no difference between Judaism and Zionism. It's over for me, this discussion. And from this point on, I don't care about the word Zionism. Zionism is Judaism right now. The Zionists tell us that, and the Jews that claim to be anti-Zionist do not want to risk anything to deny that, other than talk, and make money out of my death and the death of my people. There's so many Jewish propagandists, talkers, they write books and make podcasts and have careers out of the death of my people, right? Not one of them wants to risk their life. Not for me, for Judaism itself. They don't want to risk their life for Judaism. So why do I care anymore? No, I think everybody should now shame them into action and using language like this, saying these are Jew-saders, okay? And this is a Jew-sader colony. And truly, this is a religious war. I didn't want it to be a religious war. We all didn't want it to be a religious war. But the Jews have made it into a religious war by those anti-Zionist Jews refusing to take action. Truly, millions of Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims have died over in the last 100 years in the name of Judaism, not in the name of Zionism, in the name of Judaism. So, Jew-sader colony and Jew-saders, this is the term that we should all popularize in order to shame people into action, if there is any shame left in Jewish people on this planet, you know. So I know I ranted right there.
No, you're fine. I just didn't understand where you were going with it. But Crusader, Jews. I mean, look, they're trying to create a greater Israel, and they're calling Israel a quote unquote Jewish state. So, you know, this is being used in a very specific religious context. Even
like
though
our enemy is telling us it's a religious Jewish state, that this is in the name of Jews, that the safety of Jews in the West is the priority, and the safety of Jews in the colony is priority, and we, the victims of it, want to deny it. We are the ones supposed to deny that this is a religious war. Now, come on, done with it. Done. I think most of humanity has awakened enough. Their consciousness levels have reached a level that I don't have to play this attempt that this is not a religious war. It is a religious war, and our enemy, from Trump, from the emperor down to the garbage, the European garbage that are in the colony on the land of Palestine, all tell us it's a religious war, and it's against Islam, it's against Arabic people, it's against Palestinians, and therefore I will act in such ways. To go back to Iran, why would Iran this time act differently? And it is because, number one, the empire is vastly distracted right now with bringing all its naval and air power into the Caribbean to try to occupy, colonize, loot Venezuela. There's all this talk about invading Nigeria. So I think right now the empire and its Jew-sader colony are at their weakest point. If Iran joins defense of Lebanon, the empire is not ready to bring their ships all the way from the Caribbean to here. I personally hope, actually, that our brothers and sisters in Venezuela initiate the war themselves against the American presence in the Caribbean. Venezuela can do as good as Yemen, and those sitting duck American aircraft carriers and the bases in the Caribbean where that will be used in these attacks, were all could be attacked easily. Venezuela shouldn't wait. And I wish, actually, if Venezuela doesn't start it, that the United States starts this war. We, as Palestinians, as Arabs and Muslims, have been taking the brunt of colonialism for the last 100 years, of imperialism, the brunt of their death machine on behalf of all of humanity. And we've stood, even in this extermination camp of Gaza, has took the whole imperial war machine into a standstill for 2 years. Well, it's time for others on this planet to take some of the brunt of this death machine, and maybe then the Palestinians wouldn't only just withstand into a standstill for 2 years, but can win.
Overextend the empire. What does Iraq play into this? From my understanding, Hegseth warned Iraq, let's say, resistance groups to effectively not get involved when the United States initiates an attack. And there was unclarity about what attack he was referring to. Well, there's clarity now. Obviously, they were talking about attacking Lebanon in this case. Will Iraq get involved? Well, let's say the paramilitary groups that are part of the resistance in Iraq, will they be involved in this, or you don't think so?
Well, this Secretary of War is a crusader,
Yes, he is.
admittedly, and he is supporting the Crusaders. And so we look at these threats because the United States is worried. You see, it is distracted, attempting to invade Venezuela or threatening it into submission. It cannot engage in a full-scale war in Western Asia if it is triggered. Therefore, it's attempting to just threaten people with things that it cannot achieve. It cannot. The United States cannot take on the axis of resistance as a whole at this moment. And of course, the resistance factions in Iraq, including the popular mobilization units that are an official part of the Iraqi military, will also be joining in the situation of a war with Lebanon. I don't think people understand why would the axis of resistance be acting differently now if they don't understand this bigger picture of the global layout of militaries, where the weapons are, what are the priorities. The American economy is in tatters. The Zionist colony, the Crusader colony economy is in tatters also. And if they trigger this war, which seems it's coming, then American bases in the region, in Iraq, and now the new bases that they want to build in Syria and Damascus, because Al-Julani wants to give the Americans access to the air bases around Damascus. Pity the Syrian people. They will also come into under target of the resistance.
When do you think this kicks off? You're thinking this is soon, and the moment that it kicks off, the entire region explodes.
Yeah, clearly the Crusaders need to set the propaganda landscape before they go into a full-scale war. Some people on the ground that are worried about things may think it's going to come in the next 2 days. I've heard this from some people that I was talking to in Lebanon. They're like, the word that it's going to come in the next 2 days.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I think it's going to take a little bit more, maybe at least a week of preparations for the imperial audience. So we haven't seen yet an uptake in propaganda pieces in the corporate and government media outlets in the imperial core that would prepare psychologically the audience for the eventuality of this war. So we see a lot more propaganda being published in the imperial media about possibility of war in Venezuela. And again, you saw how long it's been building up this propaganda for the consciousness of these citizens of these domains to accept this. So in my mind, just looking at historically how these wars start, there has to be a preparation before that in the propaganda machines. I would expect at least a week or two.
Does this include a ground invasion by Israel, or is this purely an air campaign?
They have tried a ground invasion in 2006. They tried a ground invasion in 2023, 2024, and they were, whipped, So I don't think there will be a ground invasion from the south. There may be a large scale, bombardment from air. There's also the possibility of land invasion from the southern Syrian border with Lebanon. Between Damascus and the Golan Heights now is an area occupied by the Zionists. I tried a week and a half ago, before I left on this tour in Greece. By the way, this is a map of Athens behind me here. And I think a picture of George Jackson, right? So this is where I am. I'm in Greece right now. But I tried before I left to this tour to visit these areas in the foothills of the Golan, and where the Israelis occupied on the other side, to try to film those locations from Lebanon. And the Lebanese military didn't allow me to go into this specific zone to film it. So I'm presuming they will attempt to come down from the southern eastern borders of Lebanon into the Beqa Valley to try to avoid the southern villages of Lebanon that are very fortified. But you look at the geography there, and the last time the Zionists attempted to do this was in 1982. Some of the audience may not remember this, but during the invasion of Lebanon, they attempted to come down from the Golan Heights to cut off basically the whole south of Lebanon. And they were, faced off with fierce resistance. And it's up until now known as at the time there was the Syrian military, of course, that defended on from that side, but it was the largest tank battle since World War II. And the Zionists, the Crusaders, were resoundingly defeated. So although there is no Syrian military right now to have this battle, the area is still very fortified, and I think Hezbollah will be ready for them, and they will not be able to achieve the goal of land invasion of Lebanon.
Wow. All of this is sparked off pretty quickly. From the standpoint of the president and the prime minister in regards to the politics that's taking place in Lebanon, there seems to be a huge amount of pressure that's on the government in this case. And I don't mean just by Israel. I mean by the Lebanese people themselves, who seems to be firmly against the stance that the government has taken. There is no, let's say, push to overtake that government, or whether it be politically or otherwise. I mean, because it seems that the government is completely in opposite position of the public of Lebanon, almost like as a whole.
Yeah,
I hope the question makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Look, there's a parliamentary election coming up. Okay, so most probably the resistance bloc that includes Hezbollah will win more seats than it already has.
Mhm.
And Nawaf Salam will cease to be prime minister because whatever parliament is formed will have to pick a new prime minister. I think he's going to be gone.
Right.
But let's be honest here. There is no Lebanese government. There hasn't been a Lebanese government since 1942. And of course, when we say Lebanese government, it means a control of the borders, being able to defend the country, having monopoly over the use of force, being able to provide services to the population. So because Lebanon as a political entity is a fabrication, it should never have existed, just like the Zionist colony should have never existed, just like Emirates and Qatar and Bahrain. All of these are colonial fabrications, okay? Because of all of that, it really doesn't matter. Having Nawaf Salam yap and yap and yap, can he do? He can't control even one alley in Beirut. All right. No. He can't provide the Lebanese people with any services, electricity, water, nothing. Okay. So this is why Hezbollah doesn't waste much time having a direct confrontation with Nawaf Salam or any government before him, because in reality, there is no government. I tell some of, the progressives, leftists, whatever in the West that call themselves anarchists, I tell them there's only two real anarchist experiments in front of us today. ISIS, okay? ISIS and the death machine, and it's a free-for-all, rape, pillage, and so forth. And the other is Lebanon, which is a successful anarchist. project where the state doesn't matter, but there's still cohesion and it's not a killing field, and each community is providing a service to its members, right? So in a way, like this is what Lebanon is. It's an anarchist state, and it's successful, and it's the only one has been successful as an anarchist state in human history.
How does Turkey play into, or Turkey, as they like to be called now, how does that play into this idea of Syria and Israel? I mean, at this point, they seem to be on the borders. One of my other guests pointed out that he thought that there was going to be some kind of conflict between the two just because they are rubbing up against each other. Let's be clear, Turkey helped in the overthrow of the Syrian government, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in love with Israel. Where do they factor into this? Or do they factor at all into this?
Turkey is a vassal state of the empire. It has been so since the end of World War I. In fact, Turkey has as much as a genocidal thirst as a concept, as a colonial state, as the Crusader colony. I am in Greece here, and people's memory hasn't faded about the genocide of Greek people, Hellenic people, from what is now called Turkey. I, as a Syrian, have not forgotten the genocide of the Syrian Arabic peoples in what is now the south of Turkey, the millions of Syrian Christians and Muslims that were genocided and ethnically cleansed and expelled from the whole south of what is now Turkey, from Adana to Mardin. And of course, we should never forget our Armenian brothers and sisters and the millions that were killed. My family, the Marouf family, Marouf Arfi family from Deir ez-Zor, saved hundreds of Armenian people as they were marched into the desert and reached the city of Deir ez-Zor. I will never accept to somehow erase this history, and suddenly think that Turkey or Turkiya, whatever they want to call themselves right now, have done these things. This is in the long-term past, but in the current reality of them unleashing these neo-Mongolic hordes on Syria and Iraq, and the killing fields and the destruction of my own city, Deir ez-Zor, that there's nothing left of at the hands of these neo-Mongolic hordes. So no, there will never be a clash between the colonial, vassal Turkey and the Crusader colony. There will never be, because they are part of the same project of destroying the Arabic peoples, of fragmenting them, balkanizing them, of genociding and looting whole nations and ethnically cleansing them to be able to populate them and to loot their resources, from Cyprus to Greece to the Armenian people, to the Assyrian, basically Syrian Christians, and the Arabic peoples of Syria. So no, they will never clash together. And if there is one day that the Crusader colony collapses, I bet you 100% that the empire will start depending on Turkey to deliver its punishment to the peoples in our region, to make sure that we don't stand up. And this is in reality what has been happening, for decades, since the end of World War I.
Mm-hmm. So Iran put out a statement. They put out a few statements. They basically said, look, we have allegiance with Axis of Resistance, that this is a massive escalation that's taking place in the region. They went so far as to say there's already an active war in the region, that Israel has been on a killing spree, and to call these ceasefires is effectively nonsense. But they also pointed out, they said Iran forced the United States to shift from unconditional surrender to unconditional ceasefire. That effectively, look, they wanted a war. They tried to overthrow the government. They failed in doing so. And for all of the talk about a renewed conflict, because Iran has already said, look, we're not stopping in nuclear enrichment. So, basically the pretext that you guys used to initiate the first war, we are continuing to do that. And as you've seen, all of this talk about attacking Iran has effectively faded away at this point, in which case Iran points out, well, this is an unconditional ceasefire that they've been forced into because they realize they don't have the capability of either overthrowing the government or at the very least subduing the country itself through military means. Give me a take on that. Do you take that to be true, or do you take that to be that the United States is preoccupied? Or no, Iran is right. Iran, for all intents and purposes, was able to demonstrate military capability and military competence in a way that prevented A, its overthrow, but B, also got across that this is a hard target. This is not something, this is a war you would lose.
I think they are very right in their statement there. The empire wanted Iran to surrender unconditionally, and the empire by itself imposed a ceasefire when the war was going. In the last few days also, there was, now we have full understanding of how the assassinations of leadership in Iran have happened. We know that the Emperor Trump sent a peace proposal to Iran, and the cabinet convened to meet about this, and that's when they were attacked. So the peace proposal that Emperor Trump put forward was a trap to get the cabinet of the government of Iran to meet in one place and get them to be killed. So and the ceasefire that happened was not negotiated, because they will never negotiate again with the Americans, because it could be another assassination trap. So this is the one. The other thing is that it's clear, we saw all of us in our own eyes, the mass destruction, the hypersonic missiles of Iran used on the Jusair colony and on the American base in Qatar. And we saw, up until now, we don't have full disclosure from the Jusairs about the amount of destruction in the colony. But we know that for sure, even hidden bases under the the core downtown of Tel Aviv that included American generals in them were hit, and we don't know. The United States doesn't admit it's dead. So this is clearly was a military victory for Iran, and the empire is not ready to play this game again. Now, this doesn't mean that these Jusairs are not lunatics and would take us into situations that we can't even predict, because they are lunatics, and they are really driven by esoteric end of times driving values. These
red pepper and all this stuff.
Yes, they literally want Armageddon. And therefore, this is again one of the reasons that we should stop calling this not a religious war, or try to find capitalist communist dichotomy analysis of what these wars and so forth. No, this is an actual cult, Jusair cult, and behind them is the crusaders like Hexeth that want to actually bring Armageddon, and we must act in defending ourselves within these parameters. If we delude ourselves just to appease some of the public that doesn't understand this, that want us to not defame Jews or whatever it is, we are harming ourselves, because we wouldn't be able to analyze things correctly, and would think that these Crusaders and the empire behind them will act rationally. So I don't think they will act rationally. There is no rationalism in what they're doing, and therefore I think Iran is also ready for any surprises. I think the whole axis of resistance is ready for surprises now, and they have their own surprises being prepared for the Crusaders.
I think I'm one of those people that you're talking to, if I'm being bluntly, purely honest. I tend to not accept religious arguments for a lot of the stuff. And I think Sarah Bills was on the show, and Sarah was kind of pointing out, I was like, dude, you're getting this wrong. Like, these people are lunatics. Like they're breeding a heifer in Texas, because miracles need a hand. And they have every intention that some of these people are full core into this religious end of times stuff, meaning they are functioning and working towards that objective. That meaning, from my point of view, it was always, well, this is about land. This is not a religious argument. They want to steal the land. But it seems like, kind of like in slavery back in the United States, that what started off as, okay, this is our reason for it, has been internalized. And so what started off as, we just want to steal the land and we need to create a reason to steal the land, has become, to some people, a full-blown religious fervor argument of us versus them. I mean, I give you an example. One of my guests, Jim Perlman, Jewish, grew up Jewish, and grew up indoctrinated into this whole mindset of Muslims are evil, Muslims are animals, Muslims are trying to kill us, Muslims are this. And it took her to become an adult to realize, okay, these people are insane, right? I guess I'm saying, at some point, that perspective has been, and give me your take on this. Do you think I'm right about this? That at some point, what started off as, we need an excuse to steal land, has been internalized into the way that they taught themselves, into the way they talk to themselves, into a full-blown religious argument of us versus them, of Jews versus Muslims. I mean, I guess this is my way of agreeing with you, and my way of saying that my original premise of this needs to be modified.
Yes.
Do you think this was something that changed over time, where what started off as practical land argument became a religious fervor argument that was accepted as a religious argument, despite the fact that it was initially about land?
Look, for most of my political career, I spent it making that differentiation between Judaism and Zionism, just like you.
No.
Okay, and of course, I have a communist influence in me. I've read, all of that, and of course, I've lived in Canada and the United States, and worked with indigenous nations across what is called North America or Turtle Island, and have seen, the similarities and the use and abuse of religion, in that sense, Christianity, to justify colonialism, looting of land and resources, and mass genocide. Having said that, and you are an African American, there was white people in the United States, led by John Brown, that carried arms and were martyred to save enslaved peoples.
Abolitionists. Yeah.
And they triggered a civil war. There is no John Brown in the Jewish peoples anywhere on this planet. 100 years. So at this point, this is because I think moving back to the Arabic world, to the killing fields, have helped me, get rid of some of this blockage where I thought that I need to speak in this language to be able to reach the audience in the West, which unfortunately, we're not moved with words before. What moved right now the audience in the West to oppose the Crusader colony is the broadcasted genocide. It's not me and you. It's not even our philosophical, PhD level discussions, right? Oh, actually, all our efforts to educate the Western audience have failed. Without the citizen journalist on the ground in Gaza, in Palestine as a whole, in Lebanon, showing us what this colony in action is, me and you would have failed in our propaganda efforts. Okay, so given those two things, that there has been zero willingness from anyone who calls themselves Jewish to risk their life to liberate Judaism, that we're supposed to somehow, give it more, leeway than any other religion, okay, and or to save the victims of this colony. There's no need for us to anymore debate this. It's clear. Until I see one Jew carry arms, okay, inside the colony or in the West, to confront the Zionist, to me, is over. Like, why is it okay for us to criticize the Catholic Church and its crimes in the Americas? Okay, why is it okay for us to say that the Pope was a criminal for declaring the fatwa, the religious decree of terra nullius, a land without a people? This is how the Spanish and the Portuguese were allowed to genocide the indigenous peoples because they were considered non-existing, because the land was terra nullius, a land without a people, for a people without a land. Why is it that we can criticize the Catholic Church for the mass rapes of children, both in indigenous residential schools and or in Ireland, which was also residential schools? Okay, why is it that we can do that, but we can't do that to Judaism? These are all kind of things that we have been trained to do. We have agreed to put limits on ourselves just to try to massage some Jewish people into standing up against Zionism. Now, the other thing is that I feel at this moment, all the rainbow levels of Jewish people are benefiting from my genocide. From the actual colonist that is on the ground stealing my land and killing my children, to the guy that calls himself anti-Zionist, that has a career talking about the death of my people. And by the way, I dare you to find me one of those, Aaron Mette, Blumenthal, this, crap, that has studied one iota of the history of the Arabic people or Palestine. I know them. I know these people. They didn't study these things. They want to be the vanguard, the gatekeepers of even the language that we talk about when we talk about Palestine. So I am done with listening to any Jew, whatever their color is, when it comes to Palestine. And this should be the position of any of our multitudes of progressive, revolutionary, change-driven media personalities. We should stop. I don't want to see any Jew platformed, period, with or against Palestine. I don't want to see them platformed. I want to see a plethora of Arabic and Palestinian and Muslim voices speaking about their the crimes being committed in their name and their thoughts of revolution against that.
Laith, I want to see that too. A plethora of Palestinians, Arabic peoples having a discussion about the crimes that have been committed against them. But even as you pointed out in regards to abolitionists, those were whites that were getting on those buses, that were getting killed. Those were whites that were standing up, that was willing to put their lives on the line and make their voices heard. I guess I'm saying allies are allies. And I understand your point that basically, look, these people are making it a career effectively talking about me getting murdered. And they're making money off of that fact as a career. But that may just be their honest position. Like, meaning they may just have a conscience. They may have an honest take on, I don't want to see people get murdered in this way. Like, Armitage covers more stuff than just the Gaza issue, even though he does cover the Gaza issue. Max covers a bunch of stuff. I guess this is not me defending them. I guess this is this notion of, you don't want people who may be allies of either ethnic Jewish, practicing Jewish or otherwise, who are coming out saying this is atrocious what the state of Israel is doing. Or, I mean, you can tell me I'm full of shit on this if
Look,
that's what you say.
you're not full of shit there, but the difference is that there was a John Brown that carried arms. If John Brown didn't carry arms and there was not one white person that carried arms against, slavery in the United States, I would have said, shut them all up, all those whiteys. Okay? But there was people that actually cared for the notionhood of what is it to be an American white person? What is it to be Christian? Okay? And said, no, there cannot be slavery in the name of Christianity. There cannot be slavery in the name of this supposed democracy of America. Okay? And risked their life for it and died, martyrdom, carried arms. That's why Douglas and what's her name worked with them. They wanted to put her on the dollar there.
I know you're talking about Tubman.
Yes,
Harriet Tubman. Yeah.
Harriet Tubman and so forth. They worked with them. They didn't work with any other whites. Yes, they didn't respect any other whites. Why? They didn't respect the talkers. They respected those who actually put their words into action. Until I see a John Brown in the Jewish communities, I have no time for them. No time for them. It's actually confusion for us. It confuses the audience. It confuses us as a victims, where I need to, instead of me fighting every Jew that I see, I have to be like, wait a second. Did this Jew say something good about Palestinians or anti-Zionist? It confuses the victim about who is the oppressor. The oppressor are the Jews. This is it, period. The West, the whole empire, whether it's fake or not, the whole empire is killing Arabs, Palestinian Arabs and Muslims in the name of Jews and Judaism. Not in the name of Zionism. They're telling us openly, we're killing you for Jews.
Yeah.
Okay? Once that stops, once there's Jews that actually care for their own honor enough to die for it, maybe I will start questioning that again. But after 25 years working on this, I have now reached the conclusion that there is no need for me to make the differentiation until they physically make the differentiation as anti-Zionist Jews of what is Zionism and Judaism.
Laith Marouf. Laith, you always have my appreciation, man, for coming on here. Laith Marouf, he is an award-winning multimedia producer, media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples. This also includes building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities from around the world. You can follow Laith on Free Palestine TV or freepalestine.video. And definitely check out his content. Definitely check out his work. Laith is a busy beaver, to put it mildly. He's all over the place in regards to covering. But you're all over the place where you're covering that stuff. I mean, you do.
I'm in Greece, just so people can understand. We've been filming about the history collaboration common struggle between the Greek people and the Palestinian people over the since the end of World War II, and on the amazing history of anti-fascist, anti-Nazi movements here in the country. The content should be out very soon, in the next 2 days, inshallah. I hope all of you can see it and like it, and we will be trying to do the same all around the world, because all of us as human beings have these tendencies amongst us. We have this glorious histories of resisting fascism, imperialism, and division amongst us as human beings, and we want to highlight it, and Palestine is allowing us to bring that amazing history together. I hope everybody watches the content and enjoys it.
Laith, fantastic, man. You be safe, okay?
See you soon.
Bye-bye. All right, shout out to Laith. We're going to go from one great guest to another one. We are joined with investigative journalist Kit Klarenberg. How you doing, Kit? You doing okay this morning?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. How you doing, Jamal? Sorry, did I just catch the end of Laith shitting all over Max and Aaron? Or did
yes, within context. It's within a context. Yeah. It's within a context.
Yeah. Just for clarity.
I disagree with him on that, by the way. I don't think, but look, if you are in that situation where you are under threat and they are bombing and blowing up your houses, you could be a little intense also. So I get where he's coming from, even though I think you need allies personally. In which case I did point out to him that should we have allies? But Kit Klarenberg, investigative journalist, documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perceptions. And I guess that is an awkward moment, considering that you work on the Great Zone, also global delinquents. Yeah, that's awkward. But
no, it's all right. It happens. It happens. But yeah, I mean, it's a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And I think that we are living in very interesting times all round, my friend.
Yeah, I'm conflicted on this, because I understand where he's coming from, even though my response is like, oh, dude, look, I make a distinction between allies. Like for myself, like people who fall on a similar side as you, and just as a human being, you look at an issue and you say, this is outrageous. Whatever my religious preference, whatever my ethnicity, this is outrageous. This is a horrible thing. I think Laith is coming at it from a different point, though. He is thinking like, dude, my home is being blown up. I had a guest on yesterday who's like, they just blew up my house and I need to rebuild my house. And my parents are in the line of fire. You get intense when your life is at stake. But yes, unfortunately, he was hitting Aaron and Max. So
yeah, well, I don't disagree that there are false allies on the who have hopped on the Palestinian bandwagon. But I think there is a very clear distinction between people like Max and Aaron, who have dedicated most of their careers and indeed have at points taken personal and professional risks to do so, to side with the Palestinians, and people who suddenly after October 7th became bombastic tub thumpers for the Palestinian cause, having said nothing previously about the issue, but on other matters, we've seen some interesting developments in Ukraine recently. There is
by the way, real quick, I just want to interrupt real quick. I do agree with you on that. Max and Aaron had been on that issue for a very long time, even before October. So agree. I want to give you agreement. But yeah, but please continue. You're going in Pokrovsk. And Zelensky's delusions that Kupiansk is being held, that Russians have made no advances in Pokrovsk, and effectively sending those thousands of people to effectively death.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Pokrovsk is it's yet another example of a city that we were told was this impenetrable bunker fortress and was absolutely central to Ukraine's defense against Russia in the Donbass. And then in recent weeks, as Russia has systematically encircled a very thin strip of the city, the main kind of section of the city, with an indeterminate number of Ukrainian soldiers basically trapped in facing certain death or surrender after a embarrassingly failed effort to try and extract these trapped soldiers. Part of me thinks that this has been kind of forgotten about, but it was absolutely insane that the Ukrainians, or well, their Anglo-American puppet masters, dispatched helicopters to try and extract all of these soldiers, which does tend to suggest that there were some high-value people, perhaps Western military people amongst them, and the helicopters got shot at, scurried away. It was a total disaster. It seems like exactly the kind of thing that Britain would cook up, thinking, oh yeah, we can do this kind of Hollywood style rescue operation, and it failed miserably. And now we're being told that Pokrovsk actually never mattered anyway, in the same way that Bakhmut didn't matter, and Mariupol doesn't matter, and blah blah blah. But this is one area among many where the Russians have been slowly but surely advancing, and it is a ample demonstration of what even Ukrainian, honest Ukrainian analysts, who do exist, shockingly, have been saying for a very long time, which is that Ukraine does not have the manpower to maintain the quote-unquote front line. The front line is a very, very porous concept at the moment, because such as the evolution of drone warfare, Russia can strike 30 kilometers from the line of contact using drones. So, I mean, where is that front line? It's very questionable. But Ukraine's running out of people. They can't maintain their positions. They're desperately clinging on with far too few soldiers, and with a almost total reliance on drone attacks to try and stave off Russian advances. Whether the fall of Pokrovsk will lead to these big arrow advances that we've been hearing a lot about from pro-Russian commentators for a very long time, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. But it's certainly significant, and I think that there are other places like Izium, there's and territory near Kharkov, which could likewise fall quite soon. And once these fortress areas have fallen, then it's pretty much, the rest of Ukraine is pretty much flatland. Hence why Ukraine has historically been the invasion, provided the invasion route for the Swedish and the French and the British and the Americans in 1917, and then Hitler, and it's why Russia will never tolerate Ukraine being part of NATO, and the current the source of the current proxy conflicts among other things. But I think that it's as I say, we've seen this very interesting and all too common kind of narrative shift, where we've gone from impregnable fortress Russia can never take, and absolutely fundamental to Ukraine's defense, to well, actually, this isn't a defeat.
It doesn't matter at all.
But it doesn't matter.
It's no big deal. Yeah, it's no big deal.
Yeah. And I think. Sorry. Go ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
No,
Go
please. Well, I was going to say, Ukraine is screwed. I mean, Kupiansk, Russia is saying there are about 50 buildings left in Kupiansk to get rid of, in which case Kupiansk falls. They're talking about Pokrovsk, where 80% of it has been taken, and they're in mopping up operations. Seversk also, again, is under attack and will fall pretty soon. I mean, ultimately, what we're going to end up with is, I don't know if it's a big arrow, but it seems like there are a lot of cauldrons that are taking place all at once, where all of these, let's say, cities are going to fall back to back to back because all of them are being pressured all at once. And that is not a good thing. I mean, there's one last city. Oh, what is the name of it? It'll come to me in a moment, which is effectively their main fortress city that is going to be remaining in Donbass. This is not a situation of success. And Zelensky seems to be falling into delusion by putting out proclamations like, no, Russians aren't making any advances up across. We're good. We're good. Or no, in Kupiansk, we're holding the line. We're holding the line. We're going to push them back in Kupiansk. It's like, dude, read the room. Like all of these people who are trapped in these locations are going to die because they're not given the order for these people to effectively leave. Why do you think they continuously do that? This idea of we need to hold every inch, even though we have a manpower shortage, we need to continue to hold every inch. If at one point Zelensky decided the best thing, honestly, that Ukraine could have did was we need to hunker down. We don't need to have an offensive. We need to make the Russians pay for every inch of land that they try to take. But instead, they're like, we're going to have offensive, and we're going to have another offensive, and we're going to, and in each of these, they got mauled. Like they continuously got mauled, and they kept doing it. And whereas the Russians will have strategic retreats, like in Kharkov, in the very beginning, when they didn't have enough troops to hold, they were like, okay, we're backing out. Now the West looked at that and says, hey, Ukrainians pushed the Russians back, missing the fact that the Russians made a strategic withdrawal because they didn't have the manpower to hold it, as opposed to leaving those people to die in that location. Ukraine does the exact opposite in every situation. It's astonishing to me. Why do you think they do that?
I mean, it does defy logical sense, and it's something that I myself have really wrestled with. And it's like, they are clinging tooth and nail. I mean, God bless the Ukrainians. I mean, they're descended from Cossacks. They are fighting. They're extremely brave in doing this. You got to give them some credit for that. But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever that they're just desperately, to the last man, trying to cling on to these territories, which in some cases are legitimately not that worth holding on to in the scheme of things. So that is a riddle. I have a variety of theories that have bounced around in my head about this. I might be completely delusional and wrong. I wonder whether the purpose is deliberately to run the AFU into the ground so they can't fight anymore. Because I think, as we've discussed on the show before, the far right in Ukraine, which is a small component of Ukrainian society and does not represent wider Ukrainian public opinion, but is enormously influential and is effectively in control of the Ukrainian government. They have made numerous figures, such as Andrei Beletsky, who's the founder of Azov Regiment, open neo-Nazi, has said, if Zelensky negotiates, then we're going to kill him, and then there'll be a full-blown, absolutely, like a full-blown fascist coup in the presidential palace, and we're just going to keep this going. So Zelensky finds himself, rather backed into a corner where this is completely unwinnable now. But if he even talks about making any concessions, well, he's a dead man, and there's all going to be all sorts of other consequences as well. So, again, and this is just purely speculation, but I wonder, particularly when you consider that they've now started letting Ukrainian males aged 18 to 21 leave the country, and an enormous number have. Yes. I wonder whether they are deliberately putting themselves in a position where they can't keep going, so they can finally enter negotiations. Again, it's just a theory, and I might be way off, but it's something which does play on my mind, because I'm no military strategist, and I'm no military historian, but I mean, just on a basic logical level, it doesn't make any sense.
That's grim.
Like,
that's
why are
grim.
they? Yeah, why are these units not being withdrawn? Like, this is what Russia did. like in late 2022, they withdrew their forces from the other side of the curtain voluntarily because they realized they couldn't equip them and that they were, you know, at significant risk. So, and it's like, the initial phases of the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union consisted of the Soviets running eastwards away and giving up territory to the Nazis and allowing the Nazis to spread themselves too thinly and extend their logistics lines to unsustainable points. But I mean, that's a discussion for another day. But it's like, there doesn't really seem to be any purpose to keeping these, you know, thousands and thousands of people in unwinnable positions. And even the conscription continues apace, and there was this. I posted about it on X yesterday, but there's this extraordinary story of how Angelina Jolie flew into Ukraine for a photo op. She was collected. She was collected by. She was collected at the airport. When she got dropped off at her hotel, her driver got press ganged and thrown into a military and he's probably dead. He's probably dead now. He's probably dead now. You know, but it's just like they're still recruiting and snatching off the streets whatever male population exists, while allowing the younger Ukrainians where there's been a significant pressure for a long time to open up recruitment, conscription for younger generations of Ukrainians. You know, is the strategy, as I say, just get to the point where there's so few people who can be sent to the front line that Zelensky says, look, guys, we have no choice. We have to negotiate. Because, you know, as I think we may have even discussed this on a previous program. I might be wrong, but like Zelensky is lining up to be the next leader, and he is openly talking about running for president and starting a political party. And I think from the perspective of the Ukraine's Western backers, that they think that probably would provide them with, you know, like a propaganda shot in the arm. It's like, oh, we've got this venerated military chief who's now in position. He's ready to reignite the fight and like really stick it to the Russians. Blah blah blah. But like, you know, I mean, even then, it's like, you know, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the equipment, and the West doesn't have the equipment either. And it's like I've there's been a number of reports in the British media recently about how the Ajax, which is it's like an armored vehicle that Britain I think it was commissioned a decade ago. It's an armored vehicle which it had a very troubled gestation. It took many years in production. It has all sorts of problems. Hundreds of soldiers who took this Ajax light armored vehicle out on trial runs have lost their hearing because of a lack of insulation in the vehicle. I mean, it's just like something out of a. It's like something. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. Yeah. And it's like so they're going to send this armored vehicle into a war where armored vehicles have stopped being used because of drones. And it's like, you know, I mean, the West doesn't have very much, if anything, to give Ukraine that's going to be useful. Again, on a similar note, The Economist recently reported about how Western drones that have been sent to Ukraine were crap. And didn't really work. So it's like, yeah, I mean, so many people have painted themselves into a corner here, and I think that Zelensky remains committed publicly to re-seizing Crimea and 1991 borders and all that. He knows that's not going to happen, but he knows, if he admits that publicly, just having all these people wiped out to the point that the Ukrainian army consists of some horses horses and some pregnant women armed with AK-47s. The mainstream media has already reported about how there are pregnant women in frontline combat roles, which is
I've seen them. Yeah, I've seen them.
Unbelievable. So that could be an explanation. I am open to be challenged.
That is very grim. That is grim, because what that means is effectively Zelensky is like, all right, I need you guys to hold fast, knowing full well that 10,000 people are either going to die or get taken out, and to do it over and over and over and over again. I mean, Ukraine has lost like 1 million men already. And so it's like, how many more are they going to lose before Zelensky is like, all right, well, we have 2 pregnant women and a horse. Time to call this a day.
Yeah.
That is grim. That is grim. See, my idea was that the point was to overextend Russia. And because the goal is to overextend Russia, Europe has nothing to give in this, meaning Europe has nothing to lose. The US has nothing to lose. And so it's not like they're flag-draped coffins coming back of Americans or flag-draped coffins of Brits coming back. I mean, maybe there are a few, but those are, skiing accidents in the middle of summer. Like, these aren't mass-scale bodies coming back where the public gets engaged and the public gets very angry. From the standpoint of the US, from the standpoint of the Europeans, those are the Ukrainians that are dying. That's not us. And so if the goal from the European and the American standpoint is to overextend Russia, then maybe you want Russia to have to fight tooth and nail for everything, even in situations where it is obviously lost. And so it's like the Russians, Vladimir Putin has been setting himself on fire to have negotiations and to get this war over with in negotiations. And yeah, obviously the Russians have a position because losers don't get to dictate terms. So they're going to put out a document that is effectively a surrender document because they won the war. Well, if you're Europe and America and your point of view is our objective is to overextend Russia, period. If Russia needs to take all of Ukraine and they need to raise a military of 2 million men to do that, then that accomplishes our objective of overextending the Russian Federation. And so if you're Zelensky and the Europeans are like, hey, we're backing you, you would think that there would be something in Zelensky that gives a shit about his own population, though, which is the wild part to me. But as you point out, if Zelensky does that, off goes his head. He is going to be hanging from a flagpole somewhere in Kiev, and he knows it. So it's such a catastrophe, right? Like it's like there are pressures that are built into this that prevent it from being stopped. Not to mention the money that people are making. Like, think about the money that is going to weapons manufacturers, weapon contractors, the money that is fleeing Europe into America in order to buy weapons that they don't even have yet, that won't be available for the next several years. And you have money in one case. You have Zelensky, who's terrified that his life is going to be at stake. You have the Europeans and Americans that have no feedback mechanism that compels them to end the war. And so the Ukrainian soldier just keeps getting slaughtered. It sucks. I don't know which one it is. You could be absolutely right that Zelensky is like, hey man, I need some of these people to die for me to finally end this war. It even crossed my mind that maybe Trump wants people to die. That Trump is like, all right, I need them to keep fighting. I need the Russians to kill as many Ukrainians as possible in order to force it into the war where we can accept some kind of deal. I don't know. But my prevailing thought is the goal, or the very least in the policy papers and the RAND documents, was overextend Russia. And how do you do that? You do it by keep fighting, even when you know you've lost. So
yeah, indeed. Well, it's like that is of course another long-standing objective, and it must be said that Russia has been heavily tied up by this. Their focus has been almost entirely on Ukraine, and they've seen their former close ally Armenia turn westward. They've seen their former close ally Syria collapse and be overrun by Western-backed terrorists. I suppose if that is the objective, then that to an extent they're achieving that. But at the same time, I mean, the much of the West's focus militarily and financially is being drained by this as well, and I would say to a far more damaging extent. Because I mean, you mentioned that Europe not having any weapons. I read a report the other day that was hilarious, where it was talking about how it was in the financial media, and it was talking about how the share price of European defense contractors are soaring, and even their own CEOs are saying we're overvalued because the money being pumped into us is based on the idea that we're going to be able to produce all of these weapons for Ukraine, and that's going to take years.
Yes.
It's like it's like if Enron was honest. It's like they are the heads of these companies are admitting that our stock market value is falsely inflated based on things that we haven't delivered and might not be able to deliver for a very long time, if at all. So it's like meanwhile. I think that there was I read it was a government account, a US GAO, was it government accountability office review that found that like 8% of US ground combat vehicles were battle ready. So it's like again, what can be sent to Ukraine by either the US or Europe is very, very questionable. And so, I mean, they're suffering too. It might come down to this might be perhaps best perceived as like, a wider war of attrition in every field. And I think that it's something that, Russia is a much more better prepared to weather than the West is.
And by the way, I made that argument that part of, like, Putin has been getting a lot of criticism. And I want to go to your article before we close this, because it relates to the whole false flag thing, not false flag, color revolution thing that initiated all of this in the first place.
Yes.
But, I made that argument myself, that people have criticized Putin for the slow going of this kind of war of attrition that they've decided to enact. But if you think about it, if you think of all the military equipment that Europe has sent, all the money that they've sent, the governments are effectively bankrupt. It has not gone well for Europe. And you have all of this money fleeing Europe from the standpoint of the oil that is buying from the US, where they're paying, 4 or 5 times higher rates. They're still getting Russian oil, but they're getting it at a markup through like Turkey or Saudi Arabia. And the money that Europe is sending out in order to go from weapons. Like, there is a fleecing of Europe where all of this money in Europe has been fleeing into the United States, not to mention the companies that went belly up because they couldn't afford the energy costs. Those companies, many of them have gone to the US. If you're Russia and you're looking at this, you're like, slow and steady. Slow and steady. We're going to drain you dry. We're going to destroy all of your weapons, and we're going to destroy them in Ukraine so you can't use them in a larger third world war that you may be trying to enact. We're going to bleed you dry from the standpoint of the money. I mean, right now they're talking about their concern that the IMF is going to not give Ukraine money, which Ukraine is going to go belly up, which is why they're, like hyenas trying to get the Russian money, to steal the Russian money that's on the Belgian banks. And they are unclear if Belgium is even going to give them the money in that case. Like, this is not a recipe for success. Europe has been taking a hit. I mean, you're getting German leaders saying, hey, man, I don't care what the German needs right now. We need to help Ukraine. And think about that. I need to take a cold shower for Ukraine. Are you out of your mind? I don't want to take cold showers. It's cold in Germany, right? I want to be able to heat my house. And so it's like, this is the argument that these guys are effectively making to their populations. And I don't think that argument flies, especially with these governments in debt, in the way that these governments are in debt, and the way that the money is fleeing out of Europe. Slow and steady, if you're the Russians. That's the way they're looking at it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's that great line from the Taliban, which is "You have watches, we have time." Although there's like, I mean, I'm probably now on yet another terrorism watch list for quoting them. But I think that you mentioned, circling back to a piece that I recently wrote on a forgotten color revolution in Kyrgyzstan.
Yes.
So I think that we'll just rattle through that quickly, because I do think that it has an enormous relevance to where we've gotten to today in every way, which is that in the early, just as a bit of background for viewers who are,
I didn't know anything about this, by the way, and this was a damn good article.
Thank you very much, Jamal. But yeah, the wider history here is October 5th marked the 25th anniversary of the world's first color revolution in Yugoslavia, and it was the CIA, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA front, USAID, Soros, and also the British. They effectively pulled off a soft coup to get rid of the Yugoslav leader, Slobodan Milosevic. And it was something that they celebrated. They boasted about it in the media. They made a documentary voiced by Martin Sheen, I think, called "Bringing Down a Dictator," about Milosevic's fall from power. Now, anyway, the techniques that were used to get rid of him have been used over and over and over again in what are known as color revolutions. Now, initially, the US was very keen to promote factors doing this, and you can find mainstream media reports in The Guardian, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, which often document in forensic detail how these color revolutions were pulled off in 2003 in Georgia, in what's known as the Rose Revolution, in 2004 in Ukraine, in what's known as the Orange Revolution. Now, the Maidan coup in 2014 in Ukraine was likewise, sponsored by the CIA, the USAID, NED, the British, Soros, every intelligence front foundation going. But this is, of course, now denied by Ukraine ultras and the mainstream media. But I think that in terms of the template for what happened in Maidan, a much better guide is the least well-known initial color revolution, which happened in Kyrgyzstan in 2005. And it was called the Tulip Revolution. Now, the parallels between the Tulip Revolution and Maidan are quite similar. So in Kyrgyzstan, you had a popular and a legitimately elected leader called Askar Akayev, who was pro-Western, I might add, and was very much open to doing business with the West and and all the rest. He presided over a system of governance which, while far from perfect, it was the freest, most open, and most stable country in the region. At that time, its neighbors like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan were these brutal dictatorships that were heavily involved in the CIA's extraordinary rendition program, where terror suspects were savagely tortured and in some cases killed. But anyway, that's by the by. The point is that the Tulip Revolution, it kicked off in the traditional way via NGOs, civil society groups, and opposition media, rallying vast mobs to cause havoc on the streets. Now, the protests were extremely violent, but the violence was completely one-sided. Like the security services under Akayev, they didn't fight back. They didn't brutally crack down on protesters. They tried to limit the violence at most, while these brick and stick wielding thugs smashed up buildings, forcibly occupied government headquarters, etc. A similar dynamic played out in Maidan, where they were violent from the very start, but the what all that Western audiences were shown was the response of police to that violence, and it was framed as, oh, this is the evil, Russian-backed Ukrainian Putin puppets, like beating up innocent, defenseless student protesters, and that was the narrative, and it was heavily informed by what happened in Uzbekistan, where there was, a legitimately elected government was basically overthrown by a bunch of violent thugs, and then this was framed as a victory for people power and the dawning of a new era of democracy and freedom and blah blah blah. And then subsequent to this, Kyrgyzstan became under the rule of the West hand-picked puppet Kerman Bakayev. It became a absolutely savage, corrupt dictatorship where murder and false imprisonment and torture of opposition journalists, activists, and politicians became like completely routine. And Bakayev, enriched himself, his family, via corrupt deals with the US and other Western powers. And so I think that that actually, it's kind of a similar dynamic to Maidan, and we see where that has gotten us, which is upwards of 1 million Ukrainians dead.
It's effective. I mean, it's like, if you think about it, it's a very effective strategy. Like, we've had Brian Miletic on the show, and Brian was talking about this need for maintaining not just your military, but also your media space, like your ability to control. God, this sounds horrible when you say it, and to me it sounds horrible as an American, right? Just because we have a First Amendment, and this kind of goes against the main thought process in the way that we operate in the United States. But this idea of being able to control your media space, and it screws with me to say that. Every time when Brian makes that argument, it messes with me, because in the US, what that means is we are going to have a ministry of truth, and we are going to ensure that the public gets certain information, and we're going to make sure that the public doesn't get other information. And we are going to try to control the narrative as that narrative functions. Okay, well, these people lie, right? These people make stuff up all the time. Russia blew up its own pipeline. Oh, it's an unprovoked war of aggression. It's, calling a genocide as anti-Semitic. Like, these are the narratives that they would want to instill into the American population, and they would want to control social media and the media space in order to instill those narratives. So it screws with me with this idea of controlling your media space. But he kind of has a point. If you don't, what you end up with is something that looks like Ukraine, or you get something that looks like Kyrgyzstan, or you get something that looks like, I don't know, Yugoslavia at the point, well, as you pointed out, Slobodan Milosevic, where NGOs are on the ground, and you have all of this media that's paid back. When Trump kind of got rid of USAID and NED, he didn't really get rid of it. They put it in the State Department. But when he's pulled back the money from it, 90% of the media in Ukraine was effectively paid by USAID. And then you get all of these media organizations all throughout Europe, where it's like 80%, if not more, were effectively being paid from the United States, coming out of our coffers. And they would call themselves independent media, even though the money that they're getting is largely from the United States. Okay, well, what does that look like in a country, right? If you have another country that is effectively putting out narratives and stories in your own media for the best interest of our country. So I understand the argument. Like Georgia's a really good example, where the French spy, the spook from France, who's president of Georgia, did everything in her power to assist violent protests to overthrow the government of Georgia. And when Georgia said, well, we need a FARA law, the United States has a FARA law, by the way. And when they said we need a FARA law, Europe freaks out. It's like, why are you freaking out about a law for us to understand who's putting money into our politics and who's putting money into our media? Well, it's kind of obvious, right? You're freaking out because you're putting a huge amount of money into NGOs, into media, and everything else to help overthrow the government, to create a second front against Russia. Like, so it's a very effective way of going about trying to overthrow a government, because if you are let's say the US or some other country, you could say, hey man, there seems to be a popular uprising. Missing the fact of all the money that went into that quote unquote popular uprising against the government. It's effective. It's effective. Georgia was successful in beating it back, but that's only because they had the example of Ukraine and probably the example of Kyrgyzstan or some other countries where they've seen it play out. Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. Sorry about that. But no, absolutely. And I think, well, I mean, Georgia, yes, itself was the site of a like I mentioned, it was the first color revolution after they got rid of Milosevic. But it's like, they have beaten back multiple attempts to overthrow them like recently, and it's like, I think that they are providing a very clear blueprint for how you respond to this stuff, which is number one, make foreign organizations operating in your territory disclose their funding by law or face shutdown. It's a basic it should be a basic requirement everywhere. And in my neck of the woods, the former Yugoslavia, there is a website called Balkan Insight, which nobody I know locally reads. Everybody thinks it's like MI6 CIA propaganda. But it is a very effective way of shaping narratives. It relentlessly, for instance, demonizes Russia. It relentlessly demonizes the Chinese. It has published many distorted or completely false stories about both and their involvement in the Balkans, which, and then, the value of that is quite clear, because then the New York Times will report on what Balkan Insight has claimed, saying an independent outlet in the Balkans. Well, then you mean, there's like a CIA MI6 propaganda platform, which nobody locally takes seriously. Like they don't have a print copy, but if they did, people would use it for laboratorial purposes. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think that on the one hand, yes, that Georgia's success in beating back this stuff is to be celebrated. I think at the same time, like, this threat has gone nowhere. Like in Nepal, we saw at the start of September, the overthrow of the elected government there. It had all the hallmarks of a color revolution. It would, there is now a political vacuum in Nepal. What will fill that? I don't know. I wish the absolute best for Nepalese. I'm sure that there were people who had legitimate grievances. But the fact of the matter is, color revolutions always harness legitimate grievances and then replace failed governments with something even worse. Each and every time this happens, it's that there is an article, I think it's from 2012, in Foreign Policy magazine, which is like this elite, imperial journal, where they talk about the color revolutions and how they were of the early 2000s in Yugoslavia, Georgia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and they said each one was a total disaster. Like a total disaster, which it led to the election of brutal rulers who had their opponents killed. It impoverished local populations. In many cases, it's taken these countries, decades to get back to where they were before this happened. If at all. I think that we need to remain vigilant. Particularly now, where I think that there's a lot of talk about the US pulling back from Asia and perhaps ending its hostile stance on China. I'm not really seeing any sign of that myself, I must admit, but at the same time, it's like, well, in that context, if they can't win militarily, then they're still going to be pumping untold sums into propaganda. They're still going to be funding civil society groups. They're still going to be, teaching people in the art of wreaking havoc and causing chaos. We need to be really careful. I have an article forthcoming on leaks from the Open Society Foundation, which is run by George Soros, bearing in mind that when George Soros' son Alex, I believe his name is took over the running of this, he said, we're going to fund less civil society projects. These documents like openly state that they want to end the rule of elected president pro bono at all costs. And they lay out various different means of doing so. So, I mean, they've not given this stuff up. Really? It's devastating. It's devastatingly effective. So why would you stop doing it?
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. Well, as you mentioned, Nepal, I am in Nepal as we speak. I was just in Indonesia. So apparently they're trying to get rid of the governments that I'm visiting. Well, he went to Trump.
That's quite suspicious, Jamal.
I know, right?
You're like,
it's funny.
An accidental tourist. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
What's wild about that? I was here 18 years ago when they removed the king from Nepal, when the parliament effectively made the king leave. And I jumped in this time around. I had a conversation with my host, and he pointed out. He says, he said, when he found out I did the channel, he was like, so what did you think of the protests? And then, of course, right, you have to respond to it. I said, well, look, two things were at work. I said, in one sense, there's a belief that you guys had had legitimate reasons to be pissed off. Yeah. And in the other sense, you guys were being maneuvered. Both were taking place at once. He says, look, they murdered 19 kids here. So you had children that was at the protests. He said they were still in their uniforms. 19 of them were murdered by the cops. And he said people lost it. He said they went ballistic. And at that point, all bets were off. They started burning down parliamentary buildings. They started burning down houses. But they were burning down locations that were related to the people that were effectively in power, that had anything to do with the decisions that was being made. At a certain point, the cops stopped shooting. Effectively, the cops were like, we're not getting involved. Yeah. In which case, the government falls. And as I pointed out to him, I said, yeah, but, it seemed to be a lot of money that was in that coming from the U.S. also in order to kind of affect agenda. And who's going to take power? Or the person who took power after that, is that person going to continue with the Belt and Road? Is that person going to continue with the relationship with China? Like, what does the politics look like immediately after the protests? And now, all things being equal, from their point of view, we were legitimately pissed off. And as you point out, they often have legitimate reasons for being pissed off when those protests are taking place. So,
well, that's the thing, is that I never want to diminish, the individual agency of protesters abroad, and it's like, that so often, people do have legitimate grievances, and they want something better. Although it's like, there was an interesting, I believe it was Washington Post, or it might have been the New York Times. They're just indivisible in my head at this point. But there was a report on September, like after the interim government led by Karki, who has a pretty badass revolutionary history, it must be said, as does her husband, who hijacked an airplane to steal money to fund an insurgency against the monarchy. Anyway, the point is that the New York Times noted, well, Nepalese have overthrown a system they fought so hard to install, by getting rid of the monarchy, and they don't have a sense of what comes next, and that's when it gets problematic. Because as it used to be openly stated on the USAID's own website, we exploit windows of opportunity. Right. And a government falling is a very obvious window of opportunity. And it's like, as I say, the best will in the world to the Nepalese. I wish them a bright, happy future. But be extremely careful what you wish for. Yeah. By the same token.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. The power vacuums are always problematic, right? Kit, man, I have enjoyed this conversation like nobody's business. I always enjoy when you come on. The audience love you. I always love to talk to you. I think we have
my pleasure always. Kit absolutely.
Klarenberg. And by the way, I'm going to put your article below so the audience can read it for themselves. As I point out, it's a damn good article. You do damn good work, and I learn something anytime I always say the highest honors. Say you learn something in an interview, or you learn something when you're reading something that somebody writes, and that was a damn good article. Kit Klarenberg, he's an investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics perceptions. You can find Kit's work on global delinquents, the Gray Zone UK, and he also has work on the Gray Zone proper in and of itself. This started off very awkwardly, but hopefully I don't have, look, man, I don't have control over my guest thoughts. And God, you have no idea how many times I've run into issues where guests clash and conflict, and I don't know how to work that problem. It's like,
maybe don't see it as a problem. Diversity of opinion is very important, and talking to people who you disagree with is something that I am very keen on, and it's something that I try and do on my own show, Decline and Fall. Shameless plug. But it's like I didn't take his comments personally. I just thought it was quite an ironic kind of lead into me appearing. Yeah. But on that note, God bless you, Jamal. Take care, my friend, and thanks for having me on. Take care.
Absolutely, man. You be safe. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Shout out to Kit. Kit is fantastic. An inauspicious start into a conversation. But nevertheless, Kit is fantastic. Laith is fantastic. I love them both. Diversity of opinion, yes, agreed. And I got to be honest with you. What time is it? Professor Marandi is going to be on the show shortly. I did not realize in the very beginning when I initiated the show that, look, on Fault Lines, we had a diversity of opinion. We had people who were on the far right, far left, everywhere in between, and they would just give their points. And my assumption was, okay, well, you're going to do the same show. You're going to have people who run the political spectrum. Some opinions you're going to agree with, some you're going to disagree with. Yeah, so what, right? There are going to be some that you may have a hardened disagreement with. There may be some less so. But I know personally I could be wrong. And I know I may have a workable point of view of the world, but that workable point of view may not necessarily be right. And so having people who you disagree with sometimes helps illuminate you to stuff that you may not just met blind spot for. And so I don't have an issue having people on who I may disagree with or who conflict with each other as guests. That sounds good in theory. In practice, that's complicated because you get one guest who's like, I don't like what that guest said. It's like, dude, get over it. He's like, I don't want to get over it. I don't like what that guy said. I don't want to come on your show because I don't like what that guy said. And you get that nonsense that takes place. That shit is aggravating. And I don't have a solution for that. Kit very well could have been like, I don't like the fact that he said that. I'm affiliated with the organization, so I'm not coming back on your show. He could have done that. That's what KJ did, right? So it's complicated. It's complicated. Professor Marandi is going to come onto the show. He's going to be on shortly. In fact, let me pull up the interview to make sure that him and I are on the same page. I'll join this now, just for when he pops in. Look, the issue that I'm having is so as you know, I do treatments here. Everywhere I go, I have to get treatments. That is the most complicated aspect of the trip because those are things that you have to arrange typically in advance. Arrange for treatment here, there's no issue. I'm here for what, 2 weeks? Yeah, give or take, about 2 weeks. Rando doctor comes in. Rando doctor is like, hey, for one, I have an issue with doctors. I don't like doctors in general. I despise doctors as a rule. I've had, most of my experiences with them have been negative, and everything from drunken surgeons, everything from doctors that ignore the fact that you're in pain and leave you in a situation where you're by yourself in pain for weeks on end, and then find out later, oh, so you had an abscess that was causing the pain, right? So I wasn't faking it, asshole, right? So I have a very low opinion of the medical profession. It is a cancer that I just have to deal with, right? And so under normal circumstances, leave me to my devices. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. Rando doctor comes in, knows me from a hole in the wall, and it's like, hey, your blood pressure is low. Yes, I have asymptomatic hypotension. I've had it for like a decade. It is hospital policy that we need to send you down for a battery of tests, and we need to get heart stuff done, and we need to take you to the ICU, and we would like to do treatments in the ICU. I'm like, dude, you're out of your mind. Flat out, you're out of your mind. It was like, also, we need all of your medical records. You need 30 years of my medical records. You believe I have that on me right now? Well, but what? You're here by yourself? Yes, I'm here by myself. Why would I have somebody else with me? I'm traveling. Okay, well, so this is hospital policy, and this is what we need to do. Yeah, that's not happening. Okay. Now, eventually, when he realizes I don't like him, as I've told you before, I'm very transparent. If I don't like you, it's pretty clear that I don't like you. He leaves. The other doctor that is very cool comes back in and is like, it's okay. He's like, don't be aggressive. Now, at this point, these are the words that he uses because he's not a fluent English speaker. So he's using it in those terms. I'm like, I'm not being aggressive. I say, I'm not doing that. The guy doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. You guys have been with me for 2 weeks at this point. We've had no issues. I'm not doing that. Not to mention, doing that would interfere with my ability to work, which is the paramount thing that takes precedent. And so the entire time that we're having this conversation, I'm like, all right, I need to find another client, and I need to find one immediately. And so everything else that was coming to me at that point was completely irrelevant. It was just, all right, I need to nail down another facility, and I need to nail one down now. These are the complications that are associated with travel. This fucks me over royally. Because what that means is this property that I am at, that I've booked for 2 months, I'm going to lose this property because I'm going to have to find somewhere else to get treatment, which may not necessarily be in Kathmandu and may not be in Nepal. This has been a very aggravating day. This has been a very aggravating day. There is no choice but to solve the issue. And I will solve the issue, but for fuck's sake, just leave me to my devices. As I was explaining to the nurses are minions. They are trolls. They are trolls of whatever the medical profession that they're serving. They cannot be trusted. They are not your friends. They are effectively working on behalf of whatever particular doctor they are under. You may not believe that. You will find out on a bad day that is very true. And so anytime you're talking to them, you're just talking effectively to somebody who is going to agree with the medical institution that they're basically in. The problem that they have with me is, dude, I've done treatments in maybe 30 different countries, including my own. You are an anomaly. Your hospital is an anomaly. This is not normal. This is not the shit that typically takes place. You guys are making this shit up as you go along. And oftentimes, many of the ideas that you go from one clinic to the next may be different. True, within a gradient, but this is absurd. And as I pointed out to them, this is your policy. There's a difference between your policy versus the reality of events. And I understand that from your point of view, that your doctor, rando guy who just came in, who I've never met, effectively said that. But none of you had that point of view until rando doctor came in, and rando doctor gave that point of view to you. So, for all intents and purposes, you can fuck off. I was very nice. I was very polite to him. And I pointed out, it was nice meeting all of you. The staff is fantastic, by the way. They're very nice. The nurses are very mother henish in the way that they engage. I like all of them, frankly. But the day was stressful. The day was very, very stressful. So I will be leaving it tomorrow. On Monday, you will most likely see me at a different location. As of yet, I do not know what that location is. As of yet, I do not know where that clinic is necessarily going to be. And I work it out. Work it out. That has been my miserable day. That has been my miserable effing day. So Professor will be on shortly. Let me check. Maybe this one. And this. Okay. What time is it? He is running a bit late, unless I gave him the wrong time, which I hope I did not do. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure I gave him the right time. Time in Tehran. $2:30. And what time did I tell him? Oh, please don't tell me I fucked this up. Where is it? Is that right? Oh, I messed this up royally. Give me 1 second. 5:30 p.m. Date on. No, I got it right. Yeah, I got it right. All right, good. I didn't mess it. All right. I don't want the error to be on me if there's an error. And I don't see him. Look, if he doesn't join, that's fine. He's cool people. I will be able to get in contact with him at some point and us get it together. But yeah, today has been a complicated day. And that's to put it very mildly. Very complicated day. Before I close, because I don't see the professor, I have been watching the chat, and there has been a lot of conversation about what Laith had said and the way Laith closed. I have sympathies on this for Laith and this point of view, even though I don't agree with this point of view. Look, there were people in the US during civil rights that advocated for that work with, let's say, Blacks. They gave their voice to it. There were people who put their bodies on the line. And there was everything in between. And I think Laith's point is, look, man, you are blowing up our houses. You're murdering us. You've just committed a genocide. And the framing of this wasn't, we are here to get land. The framing of this was, oh, excellent, he's here. Oh, maybe he's not here. No, he's not here. The framing of this was, for all intents and purposes, Muslims are animals. Muslims are, this and that. And it was framed in this context of religion. When Jen was on the show and Jen was talking about how she was raised, the stuff that she was saying was extreme. And I've had other guests on the show who were Jewish who would completely disagree with Laith on this and would make a clear distinction between Zionism versus Judaism. One is a political entity and one is a political movement, and the other one is religion. But even they talk about how they were raised. Professor, how you doing, man? I am doing fine. You're live. Just to give you a heads up, I want to let you know. I don't want you to say anything outrageous. I'm going to bring you into the studio so the audience can see you. I don't want it to be. Wait a minute. Give me 1 second. Let me share this, and come on. There we are. How you doing today? You feel all right?
I'm very good. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. Better that you were with me. Just for the audience, Professor Mohammed Marandi. He is a professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. And Professor, we have a lot of news coming out of the Middle East right now. Israel has opened up a killing spree once again. Hezbollah has put out an open letter, effectively trying to get the government to align with it in resistance, effectively saying, look, we need to work together in our resistance against Israel. What is the point of having some kind of new negotiations when they never lived up to the previous negotiations? We've been calling this a ceasefire, when really they've continued murdering over the course of this quote unquote ceasefire. Well, Israel has effectively opened up a war directly. Ceasefire is off, quote unquote. And there's a widespread belief that the region is about to erupt. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see this as taking place also, that for all intents and purposes, the Middle East is about to, for lack of a better term, explode?
Yes, we are very close to a major war. The Israeli regime has shown that it does not recognize ceasefires, and the West has shown that they are lying when they call themselves ceasefire guarantors.
Yeah.
And the Western media has shown itself to be completely bankrupt, and so has Twitter and all those platforms that are controlled by the West, because they are promoting the Israeli narrative. They are silent about murders carried out by the Israeli regime, but whenever they do start bombing and killing people, they pretend as if the Israelis are doing this to preserve the ceasefire. This is, one of the dystopian realities that we're living with today. The West has put aside any mask that it once had about honesty, about reporting, about journalism, about human rights, about human dignity. That's all gone. They've turned very medieval, and these regimes have gone back to their roots. So the Israeli regime, for a very long period of time, they've been bombing regularly and killing people in Lebanon, assassinating, but often killing ordinary people. They murdered an American Lebanese family, the 3 kids, just a few weeks ago. And the father, who was also Lebanese American, but the US government, the US embassy, did nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
They bombed their car in southern Lebanon. And so when they're allowed to kill Americans and get away with it, obviously killing ordinary Lebanese citizens means nothing to these journalists who are based in Tel Aviv, who are based in Beirut, but they work for their overlord. So the West is preparing the Israelis. Weapons are coming in, and I think we are quite close. Hezbollah has been very patient.
Yes, sir.
Jamal, you know how I feel about Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an extraordinary organization. They sacrifice so much for the people of Gaza. They put their own lives on the line. They've had thousands of marchers, women and children included, in order to ease the pressure off of Gaza. What community would do that for another community on this planet? They're unique. So since the ceasefire, where the Western powers were supposedly guarantors, but obviously they were lying. The Israelis have been bombing Lebanon regularly, murdering people, as I said, even American citizens. And yesterday we saw a big intensification of those attacks. However, Hezbollah's patience, I think, has paid off because the whole of Lebanon recognizes, and I mean, when I mean the whole of Lebanon, I mean a strong majority. You're always going to have people on the US payroll, on the European payroll, because the West has more NGOs in Lebanon than anywhere else in the world. I mean, there are NGOs everywhere. There's funding coming from all across Europe and North America to these different groups, and they're closely aligned with militias like Samir Jaja, his Lebanese forces. He was involved in the slaughter, the very famous massacre of Sabra and Shatila in 1982, where they slaughtered 3,500. I don't know the exact number right now, but maybe 3,500 Palestinians and Lebanese in a refugee camp under Israeli supervision in 24, 36 hours. These are the US allies in Lebanon. And of course, Hezbollah has been under all sorts of pressure because Jolani is, as we all were expecting from day one when Syria fell, he is an American tool. We saw him and Petraeus in their little love fest together.
Yeah.
Petraeus telling him how, where he's worried about his sleep and how he should sleep well, and saying, I'm one of your biggest fans. And so obviously, these people were in it together. He's just basically a U.S. Tool, and Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, their role in Syria, their role in Lebanon, their role to undermine the resistance within the broader picture that is designed by the United States and the Israelis is clear for all. So Hezbollah has been under a lot of pressure from U.S. assets in Syria, from U.S. assets in Lebanon, and from the Israeli regime itself.
Yes.
But their patience and sacrifices over the past few months and over the past 2 years has paid off in multiple ways. One is that across the region and beyond, Hezbollah has been seen both as heroic and it's been vindicated, because in Syria, those who are attacking Hezbollah, saying they were supporting a dictator, now see that everything that Hezbollah was saying from 2011 was absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
So Hezbollah is both seen as sacrificing for the Palestinians, and all the accusations made by agents of the United States, by tools of the United States, people paid for by Qatar, people paid for by Saudis and others, oil and gas-rich dictatorships, and Erdogan, who for well over a decade had been slandering Hezbollah in line with U.S. and Israeli policy. Their narrative has been crushed. It's been destroyed. We see what's happening in Syria now. We see how Jolani is going to the White House to meet Trump,
Yeah.
and be a tool like all other tools in the region, like we saw in the monkey show in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. So Hezbollah's position morally in the eyes of the region and beyond has been enhanced dramatically. Second of all, Hezbollah inside Lebanon has shown the vast majority of the Lebanese, it has proven to them that the Israeli regime in the United States cannot be trusted, because there has been no ceasefire. And the United States has not chosen to protect Lebanon, even in order to pretend so that it could gain concessions for the Israeli regime. None of that. So the people of Lebanon know that the only thing that can stand up against Israeli aggression is Hezbollah. And so that, while the Lebanese prime minister, who is a tool of the United States, just like the other regional leaders, while he's been trying to push for civil war on behalf of the United States,
yes,
he's failed, because people see through the propaganda and they see what's really happening. So unity in the country is much stronger. The armed forces, the president, from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing, their coordination with Hezbollah is increasing. The president is much more concerned today about what the Israeli regime is doing than before. And he used to be the commander of the Lebanese armed forces too, so he knows Hezbollah. He's cooperated with Hezbollah in the past. So the coordination that exists, despite the Saudis and the Americans and the Jolani and Qatar and Turkey and all these other elements, the coordination today seems to be much better.
Mhm.
The unity among the strong majority of the Lebanese people is much better. And moral support for Hezbollah across the region and across the world is much higher. And Hezbollah has been preparing itself very rapidly. It has learned from the previous war its strengths and how to build upon those strengths, and it has learned from its weaknesses, just like the Iranians in the 12-day war. It's learned from its weaknesses and is dealing with those weaknesses and redevising its military posture and policy so that in the next war of aggression by the Israeli regime, they could perform much better. But it's not just in Lebanon. Jamal. In Yemen, they are preparing themselves for war, and Yemen is stronger than the Israelis and the Americans believe. The Americans, of course, they failed in their war against Ansarullah and the Lebanese armed force in the Yemeni armed forces
Right.
a few months ago. Today, Yemen is stronger than back then. Then you have the situation in Syria. Jolani is very weak. The country is broken. It is significantly worse today than it was when Assad fell.
Yes.
But under these circumstances, he's not even able to provide security through his Takfiri, ISIS, and Al Qaeda allies and their affiliates.
Mhm.
So the economy has fallen apart. The extremists who are in power, who are terrorizing people, but they cannot even provide a security for their own people and for those parts of cities and towns that are of strategic value. So discontent is on the rise. A lot of those who were before opposed to ISIS and Al Qaeda, they are regrouping across the country. So this will not bode well for the Americans or the Israelis or their regional allies. Then we have Iraq, where if the Iraqi people see the United States is slaughtering and the Israeli regime are slaughtering the Lebanese, then I think U.S. assets in Iraq will be treated very differently. And there's also Iran. So it's not as if it's just going to be between the Israeli regime and the resistance. The situation has changed, and the world has turned against Israel, Jamal.
Yes.
We've seen polls in the United States. We see how on the right people have turned against the Israeli regime. We see how the Zionists are at war basically with Tucker Carlson, which I think is a somewhat decisive chapter in U.S. internal politics. And we saw the elections in New York. I have no
Mamdani.
particular view on. I have no particular view on Mamdani, but we'll have to wait and see what he's really like. Some are concerned that he'll be another Obama. I don't know. I mean, I doubt that that's a precise.
Well, they're attacking him just because he's Muslim. They know nothing about the guy. That's the worst part about it.
And since I don't know much about him either, but the point is that people voted for him.
That's right.
70%, I think, of people under 30 voted for him. 32% of Jews voted for him. And I would imagine that Jews under 30, it would be much higher. And this again shows something that we've discussed before in your show on multiple occasions. And I really always feel that this has to be remembered, that Jews are at the forefront of the resistance against Zionism and the genocide. We've seen it from day one. We saw it during the protests in the United States early on. And then we saw the crackdown on campuses and elsewhere. But the polls indicate New York being, from what I hear, the city with the largest amount of Jews in the world after Tel Aviv. New York does not have a pro-Zionist youth among the Jews.
They don't.
And that, I think, says a lot. And those who want to equate Zionism with Judaism, including Zionists themselves, they're trying to effectively blame ordinary Jews for their crimes. But these young Jews have shown to the world that they have nothing to do with, just like ordinary Muslims have nothing to do with ISIS and Al Qaeda and all these other terrorist groups that are supported by Western intelligence agencies. Zionism, which is supported by the corridors of power in the West, they do not represent Jews, as we're seeing in the election in New York.
Yeah. There is a difference. One is a political ideology, one is a religion. And Israel has made this consistent attempt to make it as if all of it is the same thing. And to even go so far as to say that, well, if you're calling somebody a Zionist, you're being anti-Semitic. Like they've went heavy into this idea of trying to make all of these things just one. And I'm telling you, there's a huge thread in the United States that pushes against this in regards to Jews themselves that push against this idea of what Israel has been doing in Israel. So no, I agree with you. How does will Iran get further involved into this if indeed this breaks out into an all-out war? I mean, up to this point, Iran has assisted, you could say, behind the scenes. But from the standpoint of getting directly involved into a conflict, they got involved directly when they were attacked. Is that true this time around? One of my guests made the point of saying that the United States is effectively sending armaments and everything to Venezuela. They're still dealing with Ukraine. They're talking about invading Nigeria. And they are so spread out around the globe that this would be the opportunity for Iran to assist Lebanon if indeed a war breaks out. What are your thoughts on this? How do you see it?
Well, let me first start somewhere else, because you mentioned some places. Trump speaks about Christians in Nigeria, and
Right.
the way he spoke was just outrageous.
Yeah.
But well, if he cares about Christians, why is he bombing Christians in the Caribbean? Why is he murdering Christians?
Yeah.
Venezuela, by the way, Jamal, I've been there multiple times. I have very good friends there, and we're in constant contact.
It's a Catholic country, right?
Sorry?
It's a Catholic country, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
It is overwhelmingly Catholic. It is different from Cuba. Cuba has always been, after the Communist Revolution, it was sensitive towards religion, less so in recent decades. But the Venezuelan government and the political establishment is Catholic. They are a very decent people who each have faith in religion and God. And so when Trump is bombing these boats, he's bombing Christians.
Yeah.
And so if he cares about Christians in Nigeria, why doesn't he care about Christians that he's threatening in Venezuela? Then Trump speaks about Nigeria. First of all, these terror groups in Nigeria are Boko Haram, which are from the same ideology that the West has been supporting for decades.
Yes.
Coming out of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The official religion of Qatar, I would call it a religion, is Wahhabism. The major mosque in Qatar is called the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab Mosque. So this extremist ideology is Takfiri Salafism and Takfiri Wahhabism that influences Boko Haram is the result of the actions of the U.S. and its proxies. And then we have ISIS, or Islamic State, in Nigeria, the same, and we have Al Qaeda. These different groups, they're all products of the Western Empire. Just like what we have, let's say, in Ukraine, how they were supporting the right sector and all the other fascist forces that have been empowered by the United States and the Ukrainian government against the Russians and against the Russian-speaking people in the east of the country. The ISIS and Al Qaeda is their product. So in Nigeria, first of all, these people, these terrorists, are not just killing Christians; they're killing Muslims too.
Right.
It's not as if their wrath is directed at one side. And where is the money coming from? Who has the money to pay for all these weapons and so on? It's obvious. There's no doubt who is behind all this. So the killing of Christians and Muslims in Nigeria is a result of Western regimes and their policies. The killing of people in their boats, whether in the Pacific or in the Caribbean, I don't know much about the Pacific, but in the Caribbean, they're not taking drugs to the United States. I mean, I'm sure you've gone over this multiple times, so I don't want to repeat it.
Yeah.
And then if Trump cares so much about Christians, he could have stopped the war in Ukraine on day one. When he had, I mean, you're American, you were in the United States when he was elected. He won all the swing states. He had a mandate.
Yes, he did.
He had the political clout to end that war. He could have imposed a peace on Ukraine and saved the hundreds of thousands of people who've died in the last 7 months, and 7 or 8 months. And now the war is escalating. The Ukrainian defenses are falling apart, and obviously the more these defenses fall apart, the worse the bloodbath gets. So he's killing all these poor Christian men, and by killing all these poor Christian men, what's going to happen to all these Christian women, all these young women? Who's going to support them? Who's going to take care of them? Their lives are destroyed permanently.
Yeah.
Millions, hundreds of thousands, and in all millions. So he does not care about Christians. He is, as we see in Israel, he's Israeli first, and he's not even American first, let alone Christian first or Christian. But Iran's, I think, is quite clear, and we've discussed this probably together early on when we used to have our conversations elsewhere, and maybe on your own show here as well. Iran, I said before, Iran will not let Gaza fall under any circumstances. And, because during the first few weeks, a lot of people after October the 7th were very concerned about whether the resistance could preserve itself in Gaza. And I always said that Iran, under no circumstances, will allow Gaza to fall. And they fought for over 2 years, and the Israeli regime failed. They failed to take Gaza. And if the war restarts, they will still fail to take Gaza. Iran will not allow the Israeli regime to defeat Hezbollah. They will not allow the Israeli regime to take southern Lebanon. That will not happen. So by any means necessary, as was one of the shows on one of your sister programs on Sputnik or back in the day, by any means necessary, the Iranians will make sure that the Israeli regime fails. And the Israeli regime is playing with fire because the situation in the region is not to its benefit. And the world has changed, and the region has changed. They are not in a strong position. Netanyahu and his Western allies can pretend that he's been winning across the board. He has not been winning. He has won nothing. Slaughtering people is not winning.
Right.
At the end of the day, empowering yourself and your regime or your state or your government, whoever it is what's important. Israel today is much weaker than what it was 2 years ago. Starting another war will just show the world that this regime, its issues cannot be solved. Those who are still sort of half awake, those who think that some sort of peace is possible with this genocidal regime, they'll say they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Even they will wake up because it's not just Palestinians, it's everyone. They even bombed Qatar. Of course, they bombed Qatar with US support.
Yep.
And you saw Trump just admit that he was behind the attack on Iran, the war
Yes.
against Iran.
I saw.
So he has Iranian blood on his hand as he was negotiating. It just shows that you cannot deal with the United States. It's a criminal regime, and he hurts himself, by the way, because those who want to negotiate with the United States anywhere in the world, they have to take this into account, that this is the sort of negotiator Trump is. He does nothing in good faith. The Chinese will take that into account. I think once upon a time, Trump thought that by being a thug, he could get more concessions and then everyone else will fall in line. But it's really doing the opposite. People are giving him fake concessions so that he just go away, and everyone else is busy realigning themselves with each other to protect themselves against this guy. So it's not working the way he thought that if he was like the Godfather, that everyone would submit to him, but it's not working that way. He's just creating realignments. The whole world is tilting away from him, whether it's ASEAN or BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it doesn't matter. Everyone is thinking about how to protect themselves against the United States, because even if you do a deal with someone like Trump, or you want to do a deal, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
Because he'll just tear it up, or he'll just violate it. He'll lie. And so Trump, by admitting that he was involved or behind the war against Iran, is telling Iranians, don't negotiate with me. It's of no use. It's useless. And in future, Iran should definitely demand compensation for the crimes that the United States has committed against the country. But I cannot say what will happen. I don't want to predict the future because we don't know what the Israeli regime is doing. I'm not in the Iranian government. I'm not in the military. But what I do know is that Iran has many cards to play with, and so does the axis of resistance. And the Israeli regime is in a very difficult situation.
Can I ask what those cards are?
Well, first of all, Iran today is much stronger than what it was 4 or 5 months ago. It's much stronger.
Yeah.
It has been strengthening its capabilities, and it has been
Mitigating its
solving, or let's say dealing with its weaknesses.
Yeah.
The Israelis gave it they gave it their best shot. And the Iranians held back. The Iranians fired. They did not use their most sophisticated missile systems. They did not use the Iranians did not even use many of their air defenses because they wanted to keep them for if there's a bigger fight. But now the Iranians know more about the the regime's offensive capabilities. Iran's own offensive capabilities have been expanded. So Iran is much stronger today than it was, and much more confident. Ordinary people, ordinary people, once they've seen war, they no longer fear it like they did before the war. I mean, war is a horrible thing. But, before the Israeli regime attacked, many Iranians were wondering what would happen. It's like, when you go into a swimming pool, if the water is cold and you keep putting your foot in and your toe in and you pull it out again. But once you jump in, then you just, you start swimming.
Yeah.
You go to work. And we've been through that. So we know what we need to do if and when the time comes. And just like the snapback, if you recall, we discussed the snapback, I think, and I said that there will be a period of the markets being unsettled because people will fear the snapback. But then after a few weeks, they'll see that nothing really happened. And that's exactly what happened. Once the Europeans use their card, then they no longer have a card.
Yeah.
So the Iranians are not fearful of war. No one wants war. But Iran is not fearful of war. So Iran is much more capable today. It's much more prepared today.
United.
The U.S. is overstretched. It's Russia, China, Nigeria, Venezuela, South Africa, everywhere apparently. They're at war with everyone, Mexico, you know. So the United States is not in a strong position. If U.S. assets in Iraq are attacked by the people of Iraq or the resistance, what is the United States going to do about it? And
Yeah.
Iraq exports, after the Saudis and the Russians, I think they're the largest world exporters of oil right now. Messing with Iraq is not going to be a good thing for the United States or for the global economy. So, and again, Yemen. So there are many things that can happen, that could go wrong, and they probably will go wrong for the United States, and it will go very badly for Trump because he, of course, will be seen as the person who pushes the price of oil up, the person who's leading to more catastrophic wars, and the person who's doing everything for the sake of his overlord Netanyahu and the Zionists, in the Zionist oligarchs.
It was believed that Netanyahu had to keep going in regards to war. Otherwise, he'd be either put in a jail cell or at the very least forced out of office politically, because Israel keeps, the government keeps going up and down. Is that what's going on here also? That for all intents and purposes, that the fake ceasefire that's taking place in Gaza gives this impression that, okay, well, the war is over with, in which case now he needs to initiate another war in order to maintain some kind of political power and political credibility that keeps him in office?
I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. I mean, the very fact that Trump in the Knesset spoke about pardoning Netanyahu,
Right.
Why would he need to say that?
Right.
He wants to ease the pressure on Netanyahu, in my opinion, basically so that Netanyahu would not have to keep waging these wars and putting the United States in so much trouble. And then again, just 2-3 days ago, Trump said that the United States is going to help him with his
Court case.
with his legal issues. So
Yeah.
I think that must be important. Otherwise, why would a foreign leader or a leader of another entity speak about Netanyahu's problems twice within the last weeks and trying to sort them out?
Right.
It's like saying, especially when it has to do with the judiciary. But in any case, I think that has a lot to do with it. Also, Israeli society is deeply divided. The Zionists are of different political persuasions, but some of them are, they're not Semites actually for the most part.
Right.
Not
the Semites, but the
Ashkenazis,
Palestinians.
European, they're Eastern Europe. Yeah, the Palestinians are the
Yeah.
Semites. But in any case, they are deeply divided, culturally, politically, and there are lots of tensions. Apparently, the so-called president of the Israeli regime warned about. I don't know if he was warning about internal strife, and this was something that was on the rise before October the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a deeply divided country. He needs crises and crises, and I think the West likes to believe, because the political establishment in the West is genocidal. They are the Nazis of our time.
Yeah.
They're worse than Nazis, but they still are saying Israel is winning, even though the populations are seeing through all the propaganda. But I think they do believe their propaganda. Washington, I think Tucker Carlson said once that Washington is like 10,000 people, and they all either know each other, they know about each other, they're all talking to themselves. It is that bubble that we talk together about sometimes.
Yeah.
The West, these elites are in their bubble. They think they're winning. They're always winning. They're winning in Venezuela. They've been winning in Venezuela. Even though we always knew that this would be the end result of Venezuela. In Ukraine. We knew that what's going on in Israel, in Palestine, was not going to end well for the Israeli regime, and people across the world would wake up to this reality, and they did. As day by day, as the atrocities continue, things got worse. So the West, in my opinion, is miscalculating these elites who live in their bubble. Netanyahu needs tension for those purposes. And also, I think he wants to be seen as the person who created the Greater Israel. But they simply don't have the cards that they pretend they do, or they imagine that they do.
But Israel has been at war for what, 2 years at this point, and you have a small military.
More.
It's, well, you know what I mean, like this kind of constant murder, and I don't even want to call it a war. They've just been murdering people for all of these years.
I mean, even the last it's 2 years and a month now.
Yeah, you would think that the military. Part of me thought that part of the reason that they went the ceasefire route, quote unquote, was because they needed to rest their military. That you had a large
Yes,
number of
yes.
soldiers that started getting killed, injured, offing themselves, etc. And you had like tens, like 50,000, if not more, that didn't show up for military duty. And so you had
And some people leaving the country for good.
exactly. And so my thought was, okay, they needed to rest the military. But that doesn't seem to be the way Netanyahu is thinking about this. I mean, he's immediately going into another military campaign against Lebanon. And as you point out, and as my other guests will point out, this is a tinderbox. Like, you're not necessarily dealing with one country, you may be dealing with several countries at once. I guess my thing is, do you think this is part of it? Yeah, politically, where he feels that he needs to continue with war in order to maintain power. But the other part of this is the greater Israel project. And I guess my thing is, they are talking about this openly now. Why do you think there's this disparity in the way they talked about it before versus now? Beforehand, it was talked about in hushed tones. And now it's loudly proclaimed, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to take Lebanon. We're trying to take Syria. We're going to take parts of Egypt. Hell, we're going to take parts of Turkey. We're going to, and they're just openly saying this. We're going to take Jordan. That's pretty astonishing to me. Why the changeover? Why the new confidence? Is it because they've murdered so many people and they believe that Trump backs them to the hilt, in which case they need to get all of this stuff done now? Or do you think something else is going on in the way that they're thinking about this?
Well, I don't know how much of it's confidence. A part of it is confidence because, as I said, they live in their bubble.
Right.
And they're not looking at the reality on the ground where people across the world are not just turning against them, they hate them.
Yes.
But
murderers, psychopaths.
Part of it is that. Part of it is that they have to keep, these fanatics. Netanyahu has to keep those zealots, Zionist zealots, on board. Those who are in his coalition.
Yeah.
And so he has to, keep killing. I mean, they've been slaughtering a lot of people, by the way, in the West Bank over the last few days.
Yes, they have.
Just yesterday, I think 2 kids were murdered.
Yeah.
And they stole their bodies. So, but you don't see anything, you don't see the Western media making any, a big fuss about it. They don't care. Just like they didn't care about the American citizens who were murdered in southern Lebanon a few weeks ago. It just shows, they're all tools of this empire. It's things have become so clear.
Yes.
For everyone that it's there really isn't much to say anymore. But I think that it is partially to keep the coalition intact, partially because some of them are in that bubble and they think that they are achieving something. But what it's doing is creating greater anger, is creating greater outrage across the region and beyond. Because the very fact that they're seeking greater Israel is proving what people like ourselves were saying all along.
Yes.
Now they're saying, in the past, whenever we'd say it, Western diplomats and journalists would say, no, that's not the intention. We're seeking a 2-state solution. The 2-state solution, Jamal, from day one was fake. There was never an intention for a 2-state solution. And Alistair Crook, who knows occupied Palestine quite well, once when he visited, the prime minister of the Israeli regime, if I'm not mistaken, told his people to give him a tour of the occupied West Bank. Back then, there were a lot less settlers still back then. And he went and visited some of these places, and he saw that they were crazy. They were mad people. They were like the craziest of the crazy. Yeah. And he said that they were put there intentionally because these people would never leave willingly. So from day one, when the regime was colonizing the West Bank, Americans and Europeans, all these European diplomats, these human rights advocates, and these women's rights advocates, and these children's rights advocates, all of that was fake.
Yeah.
They were buying time for the Israeli regime so that it could create a new reality on the ground in the West Bank.
What do you got? Facts on the ground
So,
is the way I think Smotrich put
yes, new facts. So so you have more and more settlers, so that there would be no option. Now there is no a two-state solution.
Yeah.
So that, I think, the fact that they're open about it is not in their interest, but they are open about it because Netanyahu has to be open about it. It's what strengthens his hand as the prime minister of the regime. But at the same time, it creates greater outrage across the region and across the globe. And, he's making Hezbollah more popular. Hezbollah is becoming, iconic, and just like Ansarullah. And all those tools of Qatar and Erdogan and NATO and the Israelis and all those, all those narratives against the resistance, they've all been demolished thanks to the policies of the Israeli regime itself. And at the end of the day, even though the French murdered well over 1 million Algerians, it did not end in French victory. It ended in French defeat.
Yeah, murder in and of itself doesn't necessarily win a war. It's about objectives. Please permit me 2 more questions. One on the Abraham Accords. And the other one I want just on Venezuela and Iran's relationship with Venezuela. On the Abraham Accords, what do you think of this? I mean, for all intents and purposes, the United States seems to trying to create what they realized they couldn't do militarily against Iran. They seem to be trying to do diplomatically with this kind of isolation of Iran using all of these Middle Eastern countries. Syria may be part of it under Jelani. I mean, at this point, he's a Western puppet, so he may even be part of it. They're going to put military bases in Syria from the United States. You're getting these quisling governments that seemingly are going to be a part of it, like the UAE, Qatar, etc. Is this going to work in the way that they're trying to operate with this kind of blockade of Iran, or this isolation of Iran, using these governments that are going to be submissive to, for lack of a better word, Zionist supremacist regime that is going to be in the region?
No, I mean, the Abraham Accords is the members and the potential members are already in the same boat. And the only reason why some of these countries resist formally joining is because they're afraid of their own people.
Yeah.
And those countries that do join are taking a risk.
Very good point.
So if you think that, like, Turkey, let's say Turkey joins the Abraham Accords, what changes? They're already doing business. They have diplomatic ties. They are transporting oil from the Republic of Azerbaijan. All it does is that it delegitimizes Erdogan further.
Yeah.
In the eyes of those who are truly supportive of the Palestinian people. Or the same is true in the Republic of Azerbaijan. So, or let's say Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is very, right now, flights from Asia go over Saudi Arabia to Palestine. They allow it. So there is, and products go through from the Emirates to Saudi Arabia to Jordan to Israel in order to circumvent the blockade in the Red Sea imposed by Yemen and Ansarullah.
Right.
But if the Saudis were if they were to become members, then it would put pressure, it would increase the pressure at home. So the Abraham Accords is all, those countries that are already have diplomatic relations and trade, and those who are aligned with, remember Erdogan in Egypt, Trump said, whenever I needed him, he was there for me. Right. And Erdogan put his hand on his chest. That says a lot. So that is how these countries in the region are. It's not as if they're going to change in nature by accepting something, but it would be a badge of dishonor.
Oh, that's a really good point. They already work together. What's the difference? And the last one is Iran's relationship with Venezuela. I've seen Russian military equipment go to Venezuela, and I've seen Russians make statements, making the point of saying we need to stand by our allies. And hey, even if that means militarily supporting those allies by sending military equipment and everything else. Is Iran also in that boat? Has Iran been sending any kind of equipment? Has Iran been giving assistance to Venezuela in its plight against the US's hegemonic objectives in regards to that country?
Well, just like I didn't want to say anything about Iran and Lebanon because I don't want to pretend I'm in government or that I have any,
Of course,
information that's like I'm privy to any sort of secret information. I would say the same for Venezuela. However,
that's fair.
it's very open, the relationship between Iran and Venezuela, and
Right.
it's clear that Iran has been supporting Venezuela economically and militarily. When the Americans imposed, maximum pressure on Venezuela, Iranian engineers went there. Actually, General Soleimani coordinated that effort. They went there to restart the power plants, if you recall, and also the refineries. They helped them restart them a few years ago when they were in a lot of trouble. So Iran does help Venezuela. It did in the past, and it continues to do so today, militarily, without a doubt.
Mhm.
And just as Iran helps Cuba, there's no doubt about that. These are friendly countries. These are countries that are victims of the empire. And, it's in Iran's constitution. We've discussed this before as Muslims, but in particularly as Shia. The issue of justice is very, very, very central to Iranian religious culture. And supporting the oppressed is in the Iranian constitution as a result. So supporting the oppressed people without interfering in the internal affairs of other countries is key to Iran's national and religious identity.
Yeah.
So supporting it's clear that Iran, as we speak, will be supporting Venezuela, and it will continue to support Cuba, even though it's not yet directly threatened. But I think the ultimate goal is to take Cuba after Venezuela.
Rubio's nuts. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I think that this is going to backfire too, Jamal. Latin America, the Americans succeeded to a large degree in marginalizing Venezuela through the maximum pressure sanctions. A lot of Venezuelans were forced to leave the country. Many of them, of course, became discontent when life is difficult. You start blaming. You blame the government, even though the government may be partially to blame, but a lot of the blame is to be put on the American. It's because of the Americans and their allies. So they put pressure on people to turn them against the government, and people across Latin America see Venezuela's difficulties and all the propaganda against Venezuela, and they sort of turn against them, or at least many did. Now, what the United States is doing is turning Latin America against the United States, and people see that the Americans are murdering civilians, and that they are shamelessly doing so, and now threatening Venezuela. And we know what Venezuela has. It has oil. So it also has other natural resources. It's a very rich country, and the reason why the Venezuelan economy is not doing well is because the Americans have their boots on their throats. It's like someone strangling you and then laughing at you, saying, "Why can't you breathe? Because you're strangling me." So I don't think this is going to go well for the United States. I don't think the language used towards the people in Nigeria was going to go well. I don't think insulting South Africa is going to be of any help to the United States. Trump is destroying the empire, and he's doing it at a faster rate than his predecessors. And he is a much worse president for the American people than he was during his previous presidencies. So although these are very dangerous times, and none of us like war, but in a sense, the swifter the empire self-destructs, the better.
Yeah, Trump is more honest. That's the way I look at him. I just think he's a more honest
He's
reflection
more
of the empire.
crude.
Yeah.
He's a thug.
Yeah.
No, he's just a thug.
Yeah. Professor?
The others were thugs.
Yeah.
But they were like the
They were
Godfather. They
refined.
were more.
They're very refined.
They were more, they were more refined. They sat in their offices and let the others do their dirty work. He's just
Yeah. I just take him as an honest reflection of the way we behave. Like, but
well, not you or me, but as
yeah.
The elite
Yeah.
in the West behave. Yeah.
Whether
in I mean, look how the Europeans always try to be the elites, try to pretend that they're more civilized and they care about human rights. It was wonderful how they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to this Zionist woman.
Yeah.
And to the fool of the United. It shows that the Norwegian regime is another Trump.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more sophisticated, old school still, but the European elites, they're no different. They're all the same as Trump. They're crude monsters who are keen on retaining their global authority that they had for hundreds of years.
Yes.
But they can't do it.
Yeah.
They can destroy and kill millions in the process, but they'll fail.
Professor Marandi, Mohammed Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor, you are always welcome on the show. You always have my thanks when you come on. I always enjoy you. The audience loves you to bits. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
It's an honor, Jamal. I'm always honored to be on your show.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
And grateful for your audience.
Well, thank you for that. Have a good one. All right.
You too.
We have come to the end. Shout out to Professor Marandi. He has my thanks. God, man, he was freaking me out during that war. Because, again, context matters. And look, it's one thing, and I think I've said this before, when you're covering events or you're in halls of power, let's say in Washington, D.C., or in Britain, or prick any random country in Europe or whatever, and you are making grand speeches and saying, yeah, we're going to send weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, we're going to send weapons to Israel. Yeah, we're going to send weapons to this place or that place. And then you go home, have sex with your pool boy, and drink your cappuccino. Or if you're Trump, you get a Big Mac and you, I don't know, do whatever you do. If you're Hegseth, you snort some cocaine and drink some alcohol. Okay, that's a different reality than you being on the other end of it, where you're getting those missiles fired at you. And I'm saying that to say, when Professor was, he was in the first war between Iran and Iraq, so he's been in war before. And there's a different mindset because of the situation that they find themselves in, the level of pressure that they find themselves under. During that war, the professor was still giving interviews. And mind you, Israel was hunting down and trying to basically murder anybody that was trying to get news and media out. They were bombing television stations, for God's sake. They bombed the station while he was in that station. And yet he continued to give those interviews. And his thing was like, if I need to martyr my life for this, then I martyr my life for this. F it. That's where I am. That's a different reality, man. That's a different reality. He has my appreciation for coming on the show. And I deeply appreciate his take and his point of view. So we have come to the end. We have come to the end. We have a new member, Philip Boyle. Welcome to the family, Philip Boyle. Welcome to the family. And we have RTYR Warriors. Thank you, RTRY Warriors. We have Frank Friel. Great show, Jamal. I'm glad you were able to avoid another Jerry Springer situation. I know, right? I know. Shout out to Kit for that, for not flipping out on that. Look, man, it is a complicated thing. And because I look at some shows like, let's say like Dialogue Works or like Napolitano, and I wonder, how do they avoid guests going after each other? But then after a while, I realized, well, they're just hitting the same note constantly. It's the Love Napolitano, Love Dialogue Works. Both are fantastic shows. Both have great interviews. So no shade. But they hit a similar note. And the guests seem to be less, I don't know the word for it. Like, I've never seen one guest, and maybe because the show isn't like 3 hours, where one guest leaves, another guest comes on, and one guest can hear, let's say, a part of what the previous guest says. Like, it would be weird if you're on Napolitano and he says, hey, I saw the interview you did 3 days ago, and starts bashing one of the guests from the interview for like 3 days ago. That would be weird. But when it's one leaves, another comes on, it's very easy for it to be like, I completely disagree with that guy. And I try to think when I'm on shows, when I used to be on like radio or TV, and I would be waiting. I think once or twice I commented on what a previous guest said. I didn't bash him though. I didn't attack him. I didn't go after him. But you might say, hey, by the way, can we hit that for a bit? I completely disagree with what's being said there. You're not throwing shade at the person, you're throwing shade at the point of view. There's a difference in those things. I don't take issue with people throwing shade at a point of view. God bless, you're on the show to give your point of view, right? I take issue when I disagree with that guy and that guy's an asshole. And it's like, dude, what the hell? It's like, you're killing me. You have just attacked one of my guests. And now you've put me in the unenviable position of having to call you on the fact that you've attacked that guest. And that guest is going to be annoyed at me because somebody has attacked him on the show. And Dimitri, God bless him, gets attacked twice. Dimitri doesn't know KJ from a hole in a wall. And KJ looks at his bio, makes all sorts of assumptions, and then just slanders the guy. And then when Daniel Lazar comes on, again, doesn't know Dimitri from a hole in a wall. And it's like, I'll debate that guy. People like that. It's like, people like what? People like what? You don't even know him. You don't even know him. It's just, yeah. Yes, I've avoided a Jerry Springer moment. I've avoided a Jerry Springer moment. Thing is, though, the audience tends to love those Jerry Springer moments. They tend to like them. They tend to like you guys. If I ever need to effectively raise money, I can just do debate after debate after debate after debate. And your point of view will be thrown out continuously. It will be to my best interest in doing that. I have no clue how to do that. And I got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of debates on the show like that. Even though that is a way to raise funds for the show, if I ever want a producer. And Lord knows I'm going to have to pay for this shit that I'm in now. But you guys tend to like it. I tend to hate it. From my point of view, it creates a complication in regards to guest retention. And because Dimitri could have easily been like, dude, I keep getting attacked on your show. I don't want to come back. I was like, God damn it. He didn't do that. God bless him. He didn't do it, but he could have. As I often tell my mom, how people feel is how they feel. It doesn't have to be tethered to anything real. And I just think that is a law of gravity. People can feel how they feel about any particular thing. It could be real. It could be fake. They could just be having a shitty day. It could be a take that they may have. They may be annoyed. They may be like, I don't like the fact that you had that guest on, and I feel like I get a lot of views, so I don't want you to have the other guest on. Which puts me in the position where it's like, all right, dude, you just don't come back on. You're not going to tell me. You're not going to dictate my guess. So, yeah. Sugar Dunez, Dimitri fake cries about China and helping Gaza. Let me know. He is not fake crying about that. Look, the issue that people have about, as you've seen on today's show, I got to be honest with you, man. Doing the show, I've become less confident in this idea of interdisciplinary. What's the word? It's not interdisciplinary. It's I can't think of the word. With multiple groups working together, I've become less and less confident of that. People who cover the Russian topic, people who cover the Middle Eastern topic, people who cover the South American topic, people who cover, let's say, America, they have segments that they interlink, like anti-imperialists. But there are parts where they clash heavily so. And one of those clash points is from the standpoint of the Middle Eastern people who cover those topics, which say the Russians and the Chinese are not doing enough. And not just not doing enough, they're helping Israel. The Russian side will say those people are out of their minds. Now, the truth of the matter is, there is truth into it. There are links. I mean, Dropsite News came out with an article saying that there was a back channel between Epstein and the Russians. And it's like, why would the Russians need a back channel for Epstein to talk to the Israelis when they were already talking to the Israelis? Meaning, why would a world leader need a pedophile to have a conversation with another world leader when the links and the diplomatic links between those countries was already established? This Dropsite article makes no sense. But it gets across that there is already a relationship that was established between these two entities, right? So when the Middle Eastern people who cover those topics, they look at it and they're like, okay, this is effed up. You are working with various countries in the Middle East, and yet you're also working with a genocidal regime. That's the way they look at it. And they would go further and say, well, China is the largest trading partner for Israel. How does that work? So the Nazis are running a genocide, and one of the countries' largest trading partner makes the argument, well, hey, man, we're open for business for everybody. And so even if they're Nazis, even if they're murdering people in mass, even if they're committing genocide, oh, well, we're doing that. It's like, all right, I get you. Fair enough. That settles poorly, but okay. Like, I hope you get my point. That's not crying about it. That's just true. And then people look at BRICS, and BRICS, people have this image of BRICS as this pushback against a hegemonic order of things. And they fill it with all of these. And by the way, love the concept of BRICS. Love it. You probably have never heard me say a bad word about it in the sense of my support for it. Because there does need to be a new order of events. There does need to be a new pole by which the world operates. And it's not just BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Belt and Road, all of these things are going to become fulcrums of power that is effectively going to drain power away from the West. All of that's true. But these are realist governments. And people are filling it with this ideological fervor that may have been, let's say, something like the Soviet Union or something like that, where these guys had an ideological bend in the way that they were operating. These are realist governments and the way that they operate. And if you have this belief that they're going to get involved in some of these larger conflicts around the globe, you're going to be sadly mistaken. The conflict that's going to take place around the globe is going to take place among major nations, with Europe and the US as a declining empire. Well, Europe has already declined ED at the end of that. But they've latched themselves onto the US like a flea on the ass, on a tick on as a tick on the ass of a declining giant. And they've decided to ride that boat into the ground. The US, still trying to maintain primacy, is ending up in conflicts all around the globe, specifically in this case with China and Russia and Iran as the main three antagonists from the US perspective that they're running into. In the military sense, a canary in a coal mine, the US and Europe failed to beat Russia. And even if the plan is to overextend Russia, you ate a lot for that. Meaning Europe fleeced itself, almost like America colonized Europe in a sense, for that objective. So there's that. Trump gets folded flat out and going against China, just flat out folded. And because of the rare earth stuff and because of this kind of capitalist thing of, the capitalists will sell you the rope that you use to hang them. Well, that's kind of what took place with China, right? When nearly 80% of the hardware, or let's say the components for military equipment comes out of China, even directly or third party, you think to yourself, why on earth would you allow your enemy to have 80% of your capability? Meaning the very air that you breathe, 80% of it effectively comes from a country that you decide to be an enemy? Okay, that's weird. But again, you have a capitalist country. And a capitalist will sell you the rope that you would use to hang that same capitalist. And so that is the effect with China. So from China's point of view, we don't want a war. We don't want an economic war or a hot war. And so what we're going to do is we're going to slow down your capability for AI. We're going to slow down your capability for military hardware, military equipment, etc. You may rebuild, or you may build a rare earth industry in the next 10, 15 years. But for right now, as we do that, we are going to supply ourselves with our military equipment. So we're going to build our boats. We're going to build our ships. We have a massive industrial base that you no longer have because you sold off your industrial base. We have a massive scientific base in order to continue to build these weapons and everything else. That is what we're going to do. And we're going to do that until we get to the point where we are unrivaled and you don't F with us. And you can't compete with us on this because we have you by the balls. So in things that should be canaries in a coal mine of in military proficiency in regards to the weapon systems that are being built, Russia is doing something else. Like they're on a whole nother level. And while the country is smaller, they have been able to effectively decimate what Europe and the US have put together to go against them. In an economic sense, another canary in the coal mine, China, has been able to do the same in an economic sense. You were not able to best Yemen. If the US put its mind to it, perhaps. But is the US really set up for this notion of a land invasion of Yemen? Obviously not. And a very similar thing with Iran, where the US believes that a country of 9 million can take down a country of 90 million. And Israel gets the worst beating of its life. Yes, they have nukes. And I suppose they could have used those nukes. But in a conventional military sense, they would get decimated. These are canaries in a coal mine. These are things that should give you the sense of, hey, our ability to project power in the way that we used to project power no longer applies. Those aircraft carriers will get knocked out the water before they ever get to China. Those aircraft carriers will get decimated by the Russians 1,000 miles away. I hope you get my point. We're in a new norm. We're in a new era. And the terrifying part about it is whether or not the declining empire acknowledges that and backs the fuck off. They don't seem to. Now, yes, they may be going after Venezuela because they believe that's low-hanging fruit. Maybe, maybe not. It depends. Again, the ability to kill people is not the same thing as the ability to win a war. Those are two very different things. Yes, you may have the overwhelming capacity to murder a lot of human beings, but military campaigns are won based on objectives. And yes, it may be a means to an end. It's like you're playing a chess game and you're taking people pieces in order to get the king. But you can lose a lot of shit and still win a war. I don't know. I think we're the new norm. We're in a new dangerous norm. And I guess the question is, does the U.S. at some point acknowledge that? And up to this point, it doesn't seem like they are. Even this idea of them backing off of China, we'll see. I'm very skeptical of it. All right. I am going to end this. And I think my point was multipolarity. These groups conflict at certain points. And to me, it's kind of like I can acknowledge that one group has a feeling about something and acknowledge that the other group has a contrary feeling. Oh, well, there are things that we agree upon. And in the context of the things that we agree upon, we should move forward on those things. That is not the way everybody thinks. That is not the way everybody thinks. And instead, what you get is, well, we conflict on this one very specific point, and I need you to believe and accept my point of view on this. It's like, why? Why do you need me to accept your point of view on this? Why can't you accept the fact that I have a different point of view? Because I can't accept you have a different point of view. And shit falls apart. God, man, it happens. You will be shocked at some of the shit that has happened behind the scenes in regards to guests on that very specific issue. It is aggravating. It is annoying. It's just part of the job, I suppose. All right. So one group is reactionary, the other group knows history. Right. Fair enough. All right, I have work to do and I have things to figure out. I have a complex problem that I need to work through. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Please hit the like button if you dig the content. Please share the content if you dig the content. I will split these videos like I do my other videos. If you find yourself digging any of those interviews, please share it. You can support the content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, buy me a coffee. All of those things help this content keep ticking along. I've said before, I want to get a producer. In order to do that, the show needs to grow. In fact, I need to have a conversation with her tomorrow about it, which I'm not going to have time entirely to do because of other shit. But that's it. It's something that I definitely want to do for the show in order to make the show better and more, make the show, let's say, grease the wheels in regards to the way the operations of the show. Show needs to grow for that. So definitely help if you can. And I will end it here. You guys have a fantastic day or enjoy the rest of your day. You have a fantastic weekend. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. I'll see you Monday. Be safe all.